Good morning. I'm very pleased to have, or we are very pleased to have you join us today for our workshop on programs for independent colleges. I know some of you have driven a long distance. Some of you have worked your way across Austin traffic, and that in and of itself is a major accomplishment. So we appreciate your going to the trouble to come and join us here. We also have some people tuning in to watch our broadcast today. We hope during the presentation that we will give you information that you find useful and interesting. And we also hope that if you have questions that you will ask them, and that you, when you leave this afternoon, you feel that you've had a good use of your time here with us today. I'm going to turn things over to Lynn, who has a number of announcements to make, and then we'll get started. But again, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Just a few housekeeping items. First of all, for those attending here at the coordinating board, the restrooms are located. If you'll go right back out the way you came in, turn right when you get to the hallway, and they're right in the middle of the long hallway that goes right here on the left, both women's and men's. There are refreshments for our participants that are here at the coordinating board. There's some coffee, some water, and of course some of Jane's cookies and brownies, which I know everyone enjoys very much. Lunch will be on your own. When you came in, I think there was a handout that looked like this that will give you possible suggestions of where you can go to grab a bite to eat during the lunch hour that are close around here, so I hope you picked that up. We didn't have a registration form, so we didn't know exactly how many to expect here at the coordinating board or participants online. If you are listening online, if you could send an email to grantinfo@thecb.state.tx.us to let us know that you're listening out there, we would very much appreciate it. That address again is grantinfo@thecb.state.tx.us. That is also the email address that you will use if you're listening online to send us a question. Just send it to that email address, and if you'll put in the subject line that it is a workshop question, because we also get other questions to that same email address, and that way we will know that that is a question that we need to answer while we're doing the workshop today. Another thing about lunch, those that are participating here at the coordinating board, when you leave and you come back in, please make sure you have your visitor badge on, because our security will want to make sure that you've already signed in. Let's see. As Jane said, questions are very welcome, both from our online viewers and from our participants here in at the coordinating board, so that our online viewers can hear your question if you're here at the coordinating board. If you'll just raise your hand, and we'll make sure that you have a microphone, not so much so that we can hear here at the coordinating board, but so the online listeners can hear your question and take advantage of that as well. Let's see. I've already told you about the grant info email address. Handouts should be available to you if you're listening online. They are available at the GSP information site. If you need that web address, if you will send a question to the grant info email address, and we'll get you the link to the GSP information site. You should all here at the coordinating board have a copy of the handouts, but for those online, you can go out there and print a copy of the handouts that are available to you. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Then I'm going to turn it over to Raphael, who's going to start giving you information about the Tuition Equalization Grant Program.
Is this thing on? Hello. Good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing today? Just please speak into the microphone so our listeners on the internet can hear you. Now, just remember, there are microphones, as Lynn pointed out. I think there's one on each table, and for everybody back here, we can bring a microphone to you as well if need be. All right. If you have a question, by all means, please don't hesitate to ask. And I should have learned how to use this before I came up here. Let's see something here. Anyway, today, my name is Rafael Villarreal. I'm the one that handles the tuition equalization grant program for y'all. So I'm going to give y'all just a brief run through. Of course, there's a lot of information we'll be taking a look at, but just introducing you to the tuition equalization grant itself. Yay, I figured it out. All right. Today we're going to be talking about the main things, just the purpose of the program, initial year awards, renewal year awards, and the awarding process. Program purpose, reason the tuition equalization grant exists. What we do is we provide need-based grants to students, eligible students, so they can enroll in approved private colleges. We help them pay for the tuition differential, the difference in cost between attending a public school and attending a private school. And what we're trying to do with this is help give students the access and choice, the cornerstones of our profession. And now we'll talk about initial year awards. We're going to discuss who's eligible, what are the enrollment requirements, talk about professional judgments and hardships, and also talk about what they need to do to become eligible after receiving their IY award. Now, first off, eligibility residential-wise, students do have to be classified as a Texas resident, or they have to be receiving you can be a National Merit Scholarship, receiving at least a $1,000 competitive scholarship offered from your institution. Question. If a student is using the TASFA to apply for aid and they do not have a Social Security number, can that student be considered eligible to receive a TEG award? And the answer? Yes. A Social Security number is not needed, but they still have to meet one of those two residency requirements. Additionally, students have to be required to pay more tuition than is required at a public college or university. Student can't be the recipient of any type of athletic scholarship in the same semester they receive a TEG award, and they do have to demonstrate financial need. Question. If you have a student in supporting one of your athletic programs, but they're not considered an athlete, they're not going to participate in any type of sport or anything of that nature, can the student still receive a TEG award? And the answer? I'm afraid not. Program rules prohibit a TEG award recipient from receiving an athletic scholarship of any kind in the same semester. Now, if the student is getting, say, an athletic scholarship in the fall semester and not anything in the spring, the student could be considered eligible to receive a spring award only. But they cannot receive the two at the same time. Any questions? All right. Thank you all for joining us. Okay. All right. Students also have to be registered with Selective Service or be exempt, and they do have to be charged no less than the regular tuition that is charged of all your other students attending your university. Question. If a male student enrolls at your college before the age of 18, they don't have to enroll at registered with Social Security with Selective Service. Can that student still be eligible to receive a TEG award? And the answer? Yes. Since the student was not old enough to register when he enrolled, he is considered exempt from the requirement and can be eligible. What you have to make sure, though, is the following year, if you choose to give him a renewal award, you'll have to confirm that he is registered with Selective Service. He will have to meet that requirement in the future. Enrollment requirements. When receiving a TEG award, students have to be enrolled a minimum of 3/4 time. They do have to be enrolled at that level. We'll talk about some hardships and things of that nature that will allow that to be excluded, but in a second. We'll talk about that in a few slides. So again, the student has to be enrolled at least 3/4 time, and they can only be pursuing their first degree of those types. They can only be a first associate's, first baccalaureate, first master's, or first doctoral degree. Question. Can a student enrolled in a degree plan leading to ordination be considered eligible for a TEG award? And that answer is no. Program rules prohibit students enrolled in a degree plan leading to ordination from receiving a TEG award. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some about professional judgments and hardship decisions. A student can be exempted from some of the eligibility requirements if they meet your institution's hardship policies. What you can do is you can consider them to be decided to have a hardship decision be given to the student to allow the student to be eligible to receive a TEG award, especially an IY award. For the primary IY award, what it normally is they enroll less than 3/4 time. It may be that they have some kind of illness that prevents them from attending school full-time or 3/4 time, or they're taking care of somebody who is sick, they're the primary caregiver, that prevents them, or it may even be that they are about to graduate. Okay, and so they don't need to enroll for a minimum of 9 hours undergraduate studies, they only need 6 or 3. Things like that can be considered hardships based upon what your institution's hardship policy happens to be. Now you may be thinking, do we have to have one? What if our hardship policy is we don't do hardships? Write it down, have it available for distribution. That's your hardship policy. You don't have to allow students to receive awards for hardships. It's whatever your institution decides. You just have to make sure that it is a written policy that can be given to students in case they question it. Fun times. That's a pointer. There we go. I'll be here all night, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be here all night. And so will you. All right, I apologize for that. Again, as I just mentioned, each institution has to have a written hardship policy that's available for public review. And again, one thing I did not mention is that if you do decide to give a student a hardship decision, it must be documented in the student's file in case any questions come up and it needs to be reviewed. You need to have evidence documenting that hardship decision. Okay, another question. You have a student classified as a junior who is eligible to receive a TEG award. He has not received an award in the past. Can a student be given an initial award after their first year in college? Yes or no? What do y'all say? You are correct. A student can receive an initial award at any point in time after becoming a college student. Now, a student is pursuing her second bachelor's degree at your school. She's never received a TEG award. Can you give her an initial year TEG award? Yes or no? Nope. She can't use TEG award monies to pursue a degree type, a second degree of a type she's already obtained. Even though she's never received it, this is going to be her second bachelor's degree. TEG award monies cannot be given to her because of that. All right, now we move into high gear with the renewal awards. We're going to be talking about eligibility after an initial year award, again, professional judgments and hardship decisions, how a student maintains eligibility for a renewal award, and the maximum time frame that students can receive a TEG award. Now, at the end of their first year of getting an TEG award, a student only has to be meeting school's SAP requirements to be considered eligible to receive his or her first renewal award. And again, as we mentioned before, if the student for whatever reason is not meeting the your school's SAP requirements at the end of the IY year, if your hardship policies so dictate, you may be eligible to give the student a hardship decision to allow the student to be eligible to receive his or her first renewal award. Again, based on your hardship policy. Did it again. Wake up, everybody. All right, question. We have a student who received her IY award at another school and then transfers to your school. You take a look at her transcript and take a review, all that sort of thing. Turns out she ended up meeting her initial year award, meeting that school's SAP requirements, but she doesn't meet your school's SAP requirements. Could she be considered eligible to receive her first renewal award at your school? Answer: yes. TEG program rules stipulate that award recipients have to meet SAP requirements at the school that gave them the award, not the school that's going to be transferring to the next year. If they met that school's school SAP requirements at the end of their IY award, they can be considered eligible to receive the award at your school. Any questions?
Raphael, how would they find that out if they were meeting the SAP requirements at the other school?
At this point in time, the best thing to do would be you could either contact me to get an idea, ask for what was dictated in the end of year report to see what was reported for the school. Another good thing to do would be to contact the school directly. I did have one suggestion. At this point in time, we're still working on an online eligibility verification screen or a history verification screen so that schools can go in and take a look. Was the student ever reported? If so, what was reported about them? Were they meeting SAP at the end of the year? We're still working on that, I'm afraid. One of the suggestions that we got from one of the schools is possibly, and I'm still considering this, is actually creating a list from each school, have at least one person from each school be designated verification, individual. That way, when any school gets a transfer student, they take a look at the list, call that school, and confirm with that school, did that student meet? Did that student receive a TEG award at your school? If so, did they meet RY or IY SAP requirements as appropriate? That's something that we're still working on. I understand that it's pretty difficult for y'all right now. It's just a matter of sometimes hit and miss. Yes, sir.
There we go.
Thanks. I just wanted to share an idea that we're using at our school. When we find out, finally, a student is transferring in, they're required to go to our website and get a form that they take to their previous school and get filled out with the information about their TEG, their SAP, the amount, and bring it back to us so we can have something to evaluate their further going forward TEG eligibility.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. And I guess that also puts it upon the impetus of the student. If you want to be considered to be eligible for a TEG award, you better turn this back into us. Is that how y'all handle that? Yes? Okay, it is. Okay, I want to make sure. I got you. That's okay. Yeah, these are
You said the form 3 times.
So, sometimes they have to be, right there. Here's the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I think the list that you mentioned where we directly contact the other schools might be faster because sometimes the students don't always follow through very quickly.
Good point. Thank you for that.
Raphael?
But if anybody else, yes.
The public institutions have a contact list for residency for the same kind of thing to find out whether a student who transfers in, to know how to contact the person at the prior school to find out yes or no the student was classified as a resident. And that seems to work pretty well for them. So doing something like that for the TEG population might be relatively simple. We just need to update it each year and have it distributed at the TEG workshop.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'll send out notification when we get something arranged that makes it a little bit easier for y'all to handle situations of that nature, if I feel like it. Oh, rock and roll. Okay. Let's see here. Now, again, renewal award recipients are eligible to receive an award under a professional judgment or hardship decision. Renewal award recipients can get an award if they're enrolled less than 3/4 time, or, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, if their GPA completion rate and or hours completed from the year prior don't meet program SAP requirements. These are for students that have at the end of their first renewal award year. But we'll talk about that in a second. Again, remember, hardship decisions, even for renewal award recipients, must be documented in the student's file. A little bit more, some of the program eligibility, renewal award eligibility requirements. At the end of their first renewal award and every year thereafter, a student has to complete a minimum of 75% of their classes attempted. They have to maintain a minimum 2.5 GPA, and they have to complete a minimum of either 24 hours if they're an undergraduate or a minimum of 18 hours if they're a graduate level student. And of course, on top of these requirements, renewal award students still have to meet all the initial year eligibility requirements, residency and things of that nature. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask about an issue that we run across occasionally, and I really wish that it would be addressed in the program regulations. We have all sorts of students who get their bachelor's degree after the end of fall, and they turn right around and they start school at the graduate level. They're full-time fall, 12 hours undergraduate, and they're full-time at our school, 9 hours graduate. But darned if all they've not got is 21 hours come time to fill in the TEG report, and that's not the same as 24 hours, but I've got to put down that they were an undergraduate starting at the beginning of the year. And this puts them in a bad SAP situation. I really think that the program regulations ought to make some exception for that instead of us all the time having to say, oh, well, we're justifying a hardship for you because you have a need and you're going to school. I mean, that's just life nowadays. People don't, come in their checkered shirts and come to school in the fall and graduate in the spring, I mean, life is, come and go complicated all the time. So has anyone ever mentioned this issue before besides me?
Jane? Jane?
Oh, yes. The issue has come up. We can take a look at it. The mechanics of the year-end report, I think now we can take a look at it. You raise a very valid issue. Those students who did graduate at midterm and continue in the spring, maybe we can come up with a policy that at that point 21 hours is sufficient, but let us talk to the powers that be and see if we can get that into rule. But it's a sensible thing to do, and if we can do it, we'll have to figure out a different edit for the end of year report and maybe FADs for those cases. But FADs probably will always be an override kind of situation because that one's not as easy to fine tune as the end of year.
I realize I'm probably making life difficult for the people who do reports because you might want to know, oh, well, what was their academic level in the spring? That's an extra column of information you would need to work with, but I don't think it'll be too much harder to come up with that.
We'll definitely take a look at it.
And I think this is it is so sensible because, I mean, this is just the normal course of a lot of people's lives. Mm-hmm. They're going to school all year round, and some finish in the fall, some finish in the spring. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Again, we'll take a look at that. I'm already thinking technology-wise in terms of the programming and whatnot. That would make it much more complex of a system. But like you said, it happens. So it does need to be addressed. And we'll definitely take a look at that. Somebody turn off his microphone. Okay. No, I'm just teasing. Okay. All right, back to renewal award requirements here. Got a question. We have a first-year doctoral student who only received TEG awards as an undergraduate. In other words, they got their undergraduate, TEG helped them with an undergraduate degree. We're assuming here they got a master's degree, never received TEG, now pursuing a doctoral degree. Does the student only have to meet the initial year award requirements to get a TEG award helping her to pursue a new degree? The answer? I hate this button. Okay, there we go. The answer? No. TEG students only receive one initial year award for their entire student career lifetime. Even if they receive TEG monies pursuing different degree types, even when that happens, anything after an initial award is considered a renewal award. Now, as what was just discussed, we have students that sometimes may graduate at the end of fall and move into spring on a different degree type. Okay, you still have to be considered of all of that kind of stuff. Even students say that graduate in the fall and don't take any spring classes. They come back in the following fall. You still have to take a look at did they meet renewal SAP at the end of their last academic year? And again, if they didn't, there may be reasons for it. Again, graduation mid-year, anything of that nature. If they meet your hardship policies, you can consider that a hardship, and they would then be eligible to receive a TEG award. Again, there's all kinds of things. Hardships can be, I guess, attributed to based upon your institution's hardship policy. Something like this could be covered, but it's your institution's policy that would decide that. Any questions on this one? All right. Another question. An undergraduate recipient, again, like I just pointed this out, didn't meet year-end program staff requirements last year because she graduated in December. Okay, she's pursuing a master's degree. Can she be eligible? Again, we just talked about that. Technically, no. On the end-of-year report, you would see that the student was reported as not meeting SAP because they only completed 12 hours. So they didn't meet renewal SAP requirements. They would be reported no. However, again, based on your hardship policy, you can see here's why she didn't meet SAP requirements. She graduated. Hardship policies will allow her to get a TEG award. Again, that would be your school's decision. TEG is not an entitlement program. Just because they are eligible doesn't mean they have to get the award. Your school decides to whom to offer TEG awards. Now, undergraduate students do have a time frame. Students do have a time frame within which they can receive TEG awards. Undergraduate award recipients, if they're enrolled in a degree plan of 4 years or less, they have a maximum of 5 consecutive years in which to receive a TEG award. Consider 5 years, you may want to consider it 10 consecutive semesters, fall, spring, or spring, fall, spring, fall, spring, fall. Anyway, they have a program rules stipulate they have a maximum of 5 years if enrolled in a degree plan of 4 years or less. If they're enrolled in a degree plan of more than 4 years, then the student has 6 years or 12 consecutive semesters within which to receive a TEG award. Now again, we were talking about hardships. They can receive awards beyond these maximum years if they're granted a hardship decision and your school decides to allows them to receive awards for a longer period of time. Again, something like that would have to be covered by your hardship policy. Graduate students, on the other hand, they may continue to receive TEG awards as long as the student meets all of the program eligibility requirements, including the minimum GPA, hours completed, hours, and completion rate. Graduate students do not have a limited time period. Here's an example here. Suppose we have a student that gets their IY award in fiscal year 2008. They receive it in the fall 2007 and the spring 2008 semesters. Student takes the next 3 years off from school, returning and receiving a TEG award in the fall 2011 semester, which is fiscal year 2012. Okay? The student is in a 4-year degree plan. The student's last eligible semester would be the spring 2012 semester. I'll have a little table to show a little bit better in a second. Again, award eligibility ends 5 consecutive years from the start of the semester in which the student receives an initial award, unless the student's in a degree plan of more than 4 years. If so, then the student has 6 years of eligibility, which means that student's award would be eligible through spring 2013 semester. And here's a little table, gives you a little bit more of a visual. I got listed here if a student received their first IY award in which semester. If in a degree plan of 4 or less years, that's when it would end. If enrolled in a degree plan of more than 4 years, that's when their eligibility ends. Yes, sir.
Would that include a degree that's traditional as well as a dual degree? We've got several dual bachelor's combined master's degrees that take 5 years. So is that included in this more than 4-year category?
Correct. They would be in a degree plan of more than 4 years, so they would have a total of 6 years of eligibility. And of course, once they got their dual degree, they got a master's, whatever it may be, and if they chose to get awards later, then there would be no time period after that.
Actually, I don't know. They would have their master's degree at the end of that period, and they'd
Correct.
be working on a second master's, and I don't think they could get TEG then.
No, not what I'm
Right.
talking about. I'm sorry. A doctoral degree is what I meant. Sorry.
Oh, a doctoral.
Doctoral,
Okay.
yes, yes. Any questions? Any more? All right. All right. We talked about transferring a little bit ago. We have a student transferring in from another private institution. Since she's new to the school, is it okay to give her an award based on just the initial year awarded requirements? Yes or no? Nope. Not if she's received TEG at the other school. Again, we talked about that, maybe creating a contact list so that you can confirm whether or not a student has received TEG at the prior school. But it's best to confirm that because I've had the India report, and we'll talk about that here in the presentation I have later on the reporting and whatnot, how schools report somebody got an IY award and it comes back error. That student ID is already in the system. So we'll talk about that in a couple of sessions down. The awarding process now. We talk about the maximum award amount, tuition differential, prorating awards, requesting funds, which that process has changed, and refunding award monies. All right, for the current fiscal year, the maximum amount a student can receive is limited by their financial need, the tuition differential, which has always remained the same. The total for this year is $3,250. The student's maximum award is the least of those three items. Now, please note, again, as has been in the past, undergraduate students with exceptional need, which is defined as students with an EFC of less than or equal to $1,000, they can receive up to 150% of the maximum. So an undergraduate student with exceptional need can receive a maximum of $4,875. Now, tuition differential. Tuition differential is the difference in between the tuition paid to attend your institution and a comparable public institution. When we calculate tuition differential, we do not consider fees as part of the equation. Now, what we do is we base tuition differential off SACS levels, school SACS level, and we got here the 6 levels right here based upon how many degrees and what types of degrees a school gives. Again, so there are 6 SACS levels right there. And here's the tuition differential chart for the current fiscal year, showing schools at which SACS level and what the tuition differential is. Now, what we got here is just a simple listing showing 30, 24 hours, and 18 hours for undergraduate. These are not the all, be all, end all tuition differential rates. What you could do to determine the hourly rate. Just divide 30 by 1505 and come up with the hourly tuition differential. What schools, which are supposed to be doing, it should be doing, is calculating tuition differential for each individual student based on the number of hours that they are attending at your school. I'm going to cut my finger off. Okay. All right. Average tuition rates for law students. Resident tuition rate is $841 per semester. Non-resident is $1,177 per semester hour. Those are the law school tuition differential rates for this year. Question. Since undergraduate students at our school pay the same tuition when taking 12 to 18 hours a semester, when we calculate the tuition differentials, should we only look at the 24-hour column on the tuition differential table for their SACS level? Is that what the school should do? Nope. Tuition differentials need to be calculated per student based on the actual number of hours the student is taking. Again, that little table that I have over there was just a simple visual representation of how to calculate tuition differential amounts. Any questions? Okay. Prorating awards. Awards to either undergraduate or graduate students that are granted a professional judgment decision. If we're enrolling in fewer than the required number of hours, they do have to be prorated based on this schedule here. If a student's enrolled at least 3/4 time, they're still eligible to receive 100% of their maximum award. If they're enrolled half-time, they're only eligible to receive 50% of the maximum award they can receive. If they are enrolled less than half-time, they are only allowed to get a maximum of 25% of their maximum award. Okay, there's no per hour proration. This is a schedule that must be followed now. 100%, 50%, or 25% of their award. All right, we have an undergraduate student who only needs to take 3 hours to complete her degree. If she's given a professional judgment decision, is it okay to give her a full award for the single semester if they don't exceed her tuition differential or financial need? Of course, that answer is no. Since she was given a professional judgment decision, at this point in time, since she's only doing 3 hours, she's only eligible to receive 25% of her maximum award. Now, this has been updated. In the past, when you would request funds from our agency, you would either email or fax in a funds request form. Well, we've changed it this year. It's now an online process. As explained here, you go to our GSP website at www.thecb.state.tx.us/apps/special programs. You'll see this screen right here at the bottom, a picture of it right there. You would click on the one in red that says TEG Program Login. Ooh, okay. Instructions to assist you with requesting funds online are found above it. I highlighted above it right there. Now what you would do again is you take a look at it. Let's see the next screen. I take that back, I apologize. And when we do the drive-through portion of this workshop, we're going to be going online and visually demonstrating what it looks like, how to fill it in, and what needs to be done, everything that we're going to talk about it. I'm going to go over it right there and then. I apologize for not including a slide in it right here. I apologize for that. I should have done that. Any questions about it at this point in time? Anybody have anything about it? Feel free. Okay, no problem. All right. Refunding award monies are the same as before. If your agency, award monies have to be given dispersed to an eligible student within 5 days of receipt. If you're not able to do that, you must refund the monies to the agency. You can always get them back, but you can't hold on to them. Award monies given to an ineligible recipient can also be given to another eligible recipient, but again, it has to be within 5 days of receiving the award monies. And again, refund information can be found on the GSP website. That was the last one. All righty. Does anybody have any questions? Any online questions? Connie? Sir.
I got a question about the 4-year, back to that.
Just a sec.
1 second.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think it's on.
Okay.
Let's see.
I've got a question about the 4-year requirement. If you have a degree that is, let's say your normal degrees are 126 hours, but your music degree is 136 hours. Is that a degree, could that be considered a degree that is longer than 4 years? And how is that determined? Because it's determined on the Be On Time loan, it's determined by the type of program that the state has approved as a 5-year program or a program greater than 4 years. But in this case, it seemed like it was a little more flexible, and I just want some clarification on that. Do you understand?
If I'm not mistaken, I think what it would be based upon what your school considers it to be. If your school considers 120 hours to be a 4-year program, so it be it. If your school considers it 132-hour program to be 5 years, so be it. We don't have specific program rules that stipulate the X number of hours that I'm aware of in TEG. This X number of hours meets 4 or 5 year degree. Jane?
I understand where Raphael is coming from, and I don't think we address it in rule, but let us check on that because there may be an agency policy, and we want to make sure that we're consistent with it. So we'll get back to you on that question. Good question, though.
I apologize for that. She's correct. I apologize for that. Anybody else? Any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, our next topic is residency. We have a break scheduled for after the residency presentation. Would you like to have that break now, or are you okay to go until the end of that for the next shop? You all right to go? Okay, let's talk about residency. Fun and games. The process at public institutions is really simple from the financial aid standpoint. They wait to hear the answer from the registrars and admissions folk, and then they act on that. An independent institution like yours, you have to come up with that conclusion yourself. And so let's just talk in general about how the process works, and then we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty of it. The student completes the core questions. Now, if your institution happens to use the Apply Texas form, then those core questions have been incorporated into that form, and there's not another form that they also have to complete. The institution evaluates the results or the responses to those questions to determine whether they indicate the student should be classified as a resident or not. And then you notify the student. In this case, what you would be notifying them is whether they're a resident and therefore eligible to get TEG or state aid. At a public institution, obviously that question has to be determined before they can enter the college because it impacts the tuition rate they pay. So in your case, it's a little different. You can that decision can be made after they enroll and when you find out that indeed they're trying to get a TEG award. If the student disagrees with the conclusion, typically they should, at a public institution, there's an appeals process. And at your institution, hopefully you have an opportunity for that person to talk to you and explain why they think they should be classified as a resident if you didn't reach that conclusion. But once it's all determined, that is the basis on which you award state aid to the individuals. Once a person is classified as a resident or a non-resident, though, please remember that a year later or at another time, their circumstances could change. And they should have an opportunity to come in to you, explain how their circumstances have changed, and request reclassification. Most common way that will happen is if you have a dependent student whose family moved into Texas just before the school year began. Once that family has lived here a year, if the parent is working and is established domicile, then that student would be eligible for reclassification the next year. So these things can change over time. Typically, you're at the mercy of the student to come forward and tell you that this circumstance has changed, and then you do the reevaluation. Okay. There are a number of documents that are used to help you determine residency. We did not include all of them in your handouts today, and what I will do, though, is we'll take these documents and attach them in our website to the Independent College Workshop section so that if you want to access them and you don't have a current version of them, you'll be able to get them within the next couple of days. We'll add them to it. The statutes are where everything starts. That is the legislative basis for residency. And we can't classify anyone as a resident unless it is in compliance with state statutes. Right now, that's in Education Code Chapter 54. What we would give you, the most we could give you is a link to that statute, but we'll do that. We'll include that in the information that we give you. The coordinating board has a set of rules on residency that fleshes out what's in statute. It includes definitions and hopefully good information to help you figure out how to handle some of these more unusual cases that you run into. The core residency questions is a required document. Again, if you're using Apply Texas, you are using the core questions, so you don't need to go beyond that. But if you don't use Apply Texas, there is a set of questions that have been developed by the coordinating board with help from institutions that is designed to help get the information from the parents or the students that you need in order to make a residency decision. If you get audited, in all likelihood, they will look to see either the Apply Texas information or the core question information. So it's an important document for you. The decision tree is just kind of a graphic to try to help you see how the pieces of residency fit together. There are 4 pathways to residency, and we'll be talking about those in a minute. And that is just a spreadsheet with a flow chart to try to help you see how the pieces fit together. The contact list, this would be the one that I was talking about before that the TACRO group uses, which is the Texas Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers, uses to help their institutions know how to reach the prior institution to find out whether someone was classified as a resident. If that would be useful to you, if your transfer students tend to come from public institutions, that table might be useful to you. If your transfers are almost always there from from other private institutions, then that wouldn't be much of a use to you. Where do you have any transfers? And do they tend to come from public or private or just wherever? Wherever, huh? Okay. This may or may not be useful to you. We probably won't put it on our website, but if you're interested in it, need it, contact me and I'll send you the most recent copy. Be glad to do that. The visa list comes into effect when you're working with international students who are here. There are certain visas that allow a student to establish domicile, which is the basis of residency, and certain ones that are just temporary, that they're here for the purpose of going to school, for instance, like an F1 or J1 visa. Someone on those is here temporarily and therefore cannot establish residency. So that chart kind of gives you a yes-no sense of the international students. Exemptions and waivers, since you're a private institution, that won't help you because you don't have to mess with those. Rejoice and be glad in it. There are about 60 different programs there that have to do with it. And then the affidavit, which comes in the core questions, it's included in the residency rules. That is a critical document if you're dealing with someone who is what we call an affidavit student or what used to be called a 1403 student. It is their document that they sign to indicate an intent to apply for permanent resident status, and it's another one of those key things that you want to have in your file in case you get audited for those kinds of students. Okay? If you have any questions as I go along, please feel free to ask them. Okay, the 4 paths to residency. And I've listed these in terms of easiness. I always like to make it as simple as I can. Easiest thing is for someone who was classified as a resident at the prior school can be continuously classified as a resident unless you get information that things have changed. I mean, if you get a letter from them saying my parents have now moved to Oklahoma, that should ring a bell saying, even though they were classified as a resident last year, they're probably not a resident this year. But unless you get contrary information, that continuous enrollment is a fairly easy way to determine residency. Path 2 is the 36-month approach. This is the only one that allows a student by him or herself, without parents or domicile or any of that stuff to be considered, to establish a claim to residency. They live here the 36 months prior to enrolling in our graduation in high school or getting the GED. They live here for the year prior to enrolling at your school, which might include their senior year in high school. And by doing that and signing the affidavit, they become classified by state law as a resident of the state of Texas. When you get down to paths 3 and 4, you're talking about people who have taken steps like working or buying property or having a home in Texas as a basis for establishing a claim to residency. You're going to hear this again as we go through some of the other slides. But these are the basic 4 paths to residency. Again, the only reason why you need to mess with this is that Texas Grant, Cal, Be on Time, those require students to be Texas residents. Okay? All right. Required documents, as I said before, the core questions are absolutely required, either in the Apply Texas form or in the core question form. Affidavits are required for those students who are 1403 students and are classified as residents in that way. Other things that will probably come up, but it's your choice as to what you put in the file, would be college transcripts for their transfer students, high school transcripts for those who did the 36-month approach to residency, and then visas or a copy of the visa for those students who are international and have established a claim to domicile, etc. Okay? If you don't maintain these other documents down below, but you had an audit and they pulled a file, at that time you would need to contact the student to get some of this information. So we're not saying that you have to have these in your file, but just if you get audited, you may have to contact the student to acquire that information to support your classifications. Okay, making sense? All right. This is the continuous enrollment model. Again, the simplest thing that can happen. The student, were they enrolled last fall or spring? Okay, notice that summer isn't listed there. Being enrolled in summer only doesn't help you. Continuous enrollment is based on enrollment in the fall or the spring semester of the prior year. Okay, so the question is, were you enrolled in fall or spring? If the answer is no, then you've got to use some other approach to establish residency. It can't be based on continuous enrollment. If the answer is yes, then the question is, were you classified as a resident that last fall or spring term? If the answer is yes, then you've got a resident going forward. Nice and simple approach. Okay, if the answers to these things are no, then you've got to start looking at the core question answers and go on from there. In fact, the core questions have some questions at the beginning of it that can help you identify continuous enrollment students. Continuous, as I said, it's fall and spring. It's not summer. All right? Okay. Elizabeth paid the resident tuition rate last fall while attending a public institution in Texas. She now is transferred to your institution. Is she a resident or a non-resident? Come on. Come on. Come on.
Resident.
Okay. Why would she be a resident?
Attended the fall semester.
Okay, it was the fall semester. She did pay the resident rate. The tricky thing about public institutions are those things I called waivers. At a public institution, you can be a non-resident and pay the resident rate because you got a waiver. So when you're talking about an incoming transfer student from a public institution, it isn't exactly whether they paid resident rate or not, it's whether they were classified as a resident. And that's an important distinction that you need to make. Hopefully their transcripts will indicate that they were getting a waiver or not, but that is a relevant question to determining the answer to this question. If this student was classified as a resident, as opposed to just getting to pay the resident rate, then yes, she would qualify as a resident at your school. Okay? You'll notice when you look at the core questions that these questions along the side next to all of these case studies that I have is how the core questions are set out. You're trying to find out whether it's a continuing student, were they classified as a resident, were they here 36 months, and you just go so far down this line to solve the issue. You don't have to answer all those questions for everybody as you go along. Okay, Matthew is a teacher and takes classes towards his master's degree each summer. Last summer, he was classified as a resident. Notice it said it, classified as a resident. Is he a resident this year? When was he enrolled? So was he a resident this year? Mainly, you don't know. You can't base it on continuous enrollment because he wasn't enrolled in fall or spring. Okay? But you don't know yet whether he's a resident. You have to look at other things. He may well qualify through one of the other approaches. Okay. This is the next approach, the 36-month approach. First question, was the student in Texas the 36 months prior to high school graduation and the year before enrolling in college? Now, 36 months doesn't mean they were here for their sophomore, junior, and senior year. They've got to pull in that summer before their sophomore year to get the 36 months. So you can't just look at those 3 years of the transcript. You really have to look a bit further. If they were here for those 36 months leading up to high school graduation or the GED and the year before, then if they say no, then you've got to ask more questions. That means you're getting into the other parts of the core questions in order to determine residency. If they say yes, then the next question is, are they a U.S. citizen or permanent resident? And that's something you would get from the core questions or the Apply Texas form. If the answer there is no, you still have another question. That student might still qualify, and that's whether you have an affidavit for the student. If they have the affidavit on file that indicates it's a notarized statement saying, I swear I plan to apply for permanent resident status as soon as I'm eligible to do so, then that, along with being enrolled or being in Texas for those 36 months in the year before college, allows that person to be classified as a resident. Again, if you get into the no kind of situation, you just need to ask more questions. Make sense? Good, 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 good. All right. Go. Okay. Clark graduated high school in Texas in 1980, having lived here all his life, and he now wants to go to college. Is he a resident or a non-resident? Okay. Does he meet the 36-month approach? Yeah. It says they lived in Texas all his life leading up to 1980. Has he met the prior year requirement? We don't know. Not from that statement. We know he was here up until 1980, but what has he been doing now? And so he would have to indicate that he'd been living in Texas this prior year in order for you to be able to classify him as a resident based on the 36-month approach. Okay? So again, in the core questions, there's a question, have you been residing in Texas for the last 12 months or so? So that's for the purpose, is to see whether they meet that section. There could have been a 20-year gap between when he graduated high school and when he came back and started living in Texas. But if he gets those two pieces together, he can be classified as a resident. Okay? Sorry. Carl received a high school certificate of completion in spring 2012. He just needs to pass the math tax test to get his diploma. Is he eligible for residency based on the 36-month approach? He's been living in Texas ever since he completed the certificate of completion. A certificate of completion is not graduation from high school. He is not yet graduated. So the answer to this case would be no. Once he does graduate, or if he completes the GED, because he can't, maybe this tax test is something that just defeats him. If he then goes and gets the GED instead and can show he was here 36 months, then he can still get into being classified as a resident this way. Now, these things that I'm talking about in the 36 month, is talking about the individual establishing residency on his or her own situation, without regard to the parents and that kind of thing. It doesn't mean if they can't qualify on the 36th month, they can't be classified as residents. You just have to ask more questions to figure it out. Okay, when you start talking about domicile, domicile is the basis of establishing a claim to residency. It can be a dependent. If it's the dependent student, then the parent has to be the one who establishes domicile, and then the child, as their dependent, can piggyback on that to become a resident. If it's an independent student, then that person has to establish the claim to domicile. So the question is, are you independent or dependent? If you're dependent, then you look at the parent's information. It's just like a FAFSA. If it's a dependent student, you have to look at the FAFSA's resources. In this case, if it's a dependent student, you have to look at whether the parent established domicile. If it's an independent student, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, did the parent domicile in Texas? And domicile is established primarily by working in the state for 12 months. If you can afford to do so, you buy a home and maintain it for 12 months. Or buy a business and run it in here in Texas for 12 months. Most people go through the employment angle to establish domicile. If they have done that for 12 months, then the parent is a resident and the dependent child is a resident because of the parent. If it's an independent student, it's basically the same chart, only you're looking at the dependent or the independent student's information. You're ignoring the parents. I've been on my own for 10 years, and I just moved to Texas and wanted to get my degree. You don't have to worry about what my parents' situation was. Okay, again, very similar to the FAFSA situation. Hello. There we go. The questions relevant to domicile is whose domicile is relevant. Just like with FAFSA, is this a dependent or an independent student? Are you worried about the parents or are you worried about the student? How does one establish domicile? And the three main ways are by being employed for 12 months, owning a residence here for 12 months and maintaining it, or owning a business and maintaining it for 12 months. There are other things, but those are the most common ones. Who can establish domicile? Remember the table that I mentioned before, the visa list? Generally, U.S. citizens and permanent residents can do that. But international students have to have the right kind of visa in order for them to be eligible to establish domicile. And you have these terms that you need to know. What's a dependent? What is domicile? Temporary absence. Let's say you have a kid in family who's lived in Texas all their lives, and they go on vacation to Illinois for the summer before the start of the summer year, the freshman year. Did they lose a claim to residency by being gone that summer? That's a temporary absence, and so they wouldn't lose it. There are things like that that can come up. Yes, ma'am.
Would this be in the same situation for missionary parents?
Yes.
That claim tax returns for the Texas?
I was afraid someone would ask the question. The question has to do with missionary families. The problem I have with missionary families is the definition of temporary could be 10 or 12 years, and so that to me is a problem. But if they have a mission or an assignment to go to Venezuela for 3 years, and it's understood that they will be coming back to Texas at the end of that 3 years, and that their employer can provide documentation indicating this is a temporary assignment and they would be coming back, then no, that would not disrupt their claim to residency.
Would income tax be suffice if they do income tax but they're missionaries and they're doing income tax every year? as Texas residents?
That certainly helps. The comment is that if they're filing income tax returns showing that they're missionaries and filing it in Texas, filing income taxes in Texas helps document that they still have their toe back in the state. Doing their banking here, having a will on file here, those kinds of things help support it. But if this gets extended further and further, and we see these things for many, many years at time, then at some point along there you start going, how can you call that a temporary absence from the state? And the kinds of things you're talking about, those every time we get a break, we come back and we live in Texas, and this is our home, and these kinds of things can help support it. But it's not a simple thing, yes or no question. Okay, you'll find definitions for these terms in the rules that I talked about in the coordinating board rules. So if you have any questions when you have a chance to look at those, feel free to contact me and I'll be glad to help you with them. Okay, Mark moved to Texas to live with his grandmother when he was a freshman in high school. His parents live in Oklahoma and still claim him. If he graduates in Texas and goes to Texas College, is he a resident of Texas or of Oklahoma? Okay, he moves here as a freshman. So a freshman, then sophomore, then junior, then senior year, he will be here 36 months. The fact his parents are in Oklahoma and claiming him doesn't undo the fact that he's met the 36-month approach. Now, the next question is, where has he lived for the last 12 months? If he graduates high school and then goes back home and lives with his folks for a while, and it's not a temporary thing, it's really a move back there, look for a job, that kind of thing, and it doesn't work out, so he comes back here to go to school, he's made it very complicated. But if indeed he graduates high school and the next fall starts at your institution, then he's got a very strong claim to residency based on the 36-month approach. Again, it's a unique and nice, clean way for a student on his or her own to indicate his domicile. Okay?
Jane?
Yes, sir.
I've got a question.
Yep.
It kind of goes to professional judgment. Well, take that situation. Let's say he goes back for the summer and lives with his parents, and he starts a job at a Walmart.
Yep.
And then he comes to your school in September. And he says, I graduated from high school, I meet this requirement. If you're going to document that, if you have a signed statement from him that says, I had no intention of staying in Oklahoma, I'm coming, is that going to clear an audit? Is that all you really need to?
That should do it.
Okay.
Again, you don't know where the auditor will be coming from, and so you could end up with an exception, but I would not expect it. If they contacted us, we would probably say that seems like a reasonable thing to accept on the school's part. But if he goes back home, again, the problem is intent and trying to prove intent. Most kids go home in the summer from college. If he stays home for the fall term and then come back in the spring, or stays out for a year, that gets really, really messy. And so I think that could be a real problem. If he gets a job with XYZ oil company and he's working on an oil derrick for that summer, that starts getting a little iffy, because you would think that he has graduated from high school, he's gotten him a job, and then something doesn't work out, so he comes back. So there's a lot of subjectivity to residency. One of the most important things is to be consistent. If you come up with that kind of a scenario, be sure you treat students consistently who are in that situation. But that high school, I went to South America after I graduated high school because my parents were down there on a temporary job. So certainly looking at my record, they would go, oh my gosh, but I've lived the last 50 years of my life in Texas, so I'm a Texan. So it is a lot of subjectivity. And the main thing is to feel comfortable defending it, to have the documentation to explain why you made those decisions. You will come up with some auditors who don't have the same perspective, and they might object to it, but that's a part of life. Okay. George is independent. He moved to Texas 3 years ago. He worked for IBM in Austin ever since and enrolled in a public institution 1 year ago. Is he a resident or a non-resident? Come on, guys, this one's easy. He's a resident. Right. This isn't a trick question. Okay, so yeah, he came here to work. He worked. He's now going to school. He's been here and established a claim to residency. Henry worked in Texas for 4 years in the early 2000s, but has not worked for the past several years, though he has continued to live in Texas. He doesn't own a home or business in Texas. Is he a resident or a non-resident? Okay, looking at his work, did he establish a claim to residency at that time?
Yes.
Okay, has anything happened that would disrupt that claim to residency? It doesn't look like it. So in all likelihood, if he can show that he's resided here for the past years since working, then he would be eligible to claim residency. Okay, a student fills out the form, a student or the parents fill out the form, the Apply Texas form or the core questions. If they intentionally mislead you by giving false information on those forms, then they are liable for paying, or in this case, it would be paying back the TEG or whatever that you gave to them, because they were not eligible to begin with and they misled you to convince you to otherwise. Most students don't know enough about residency to intentionally not tell you something you should know. So I think this is a fairly rare thing to happen, but it can. And it's hard to figure out whether he should have known or she should have known that would impact residency or not. So this, although this is in statute, it's very hard to figure out when the student is liable. On the other hand, if the institution makes a mistake, let me see if I have a slide on that. I don't remember. Okay. If the student fills out the form and you misinterpret it, or you just flat make a mistake in your classification, then the student, at least at a public institution, what would happen is that if the school had caused the student to pay the non-resident rate, the student would then get refunded the difference between resident and non-resident. Since you're dealing with financial aid that you didn't award, I don't see that ever coming up. You could have a student really complain like, I was eligible for a TEG, but you never gave it to me. But you don't have enough funds to make awards to all eligible TEG students as it is. So I don't think that a student would have a very strong argument there. Certainly you don't want that to happen. You want to give everyone consideration. So you want to make this determination for students who come to your school. But it's not like at the public institutions where by not being classified as a resident, they're charged a penalty and a higher tuition rate. Okay? Okay. One new thing. Yes, sir.
Oh, thanks. Again, I just wanted to share an idea that we're using that can help cut through some of that fog. We have got our own supplemental application for financial aid where we gather in extra information to help us with awarding decisions. And we have some of this decision tree logic going on. Over the years, we're hoping to refine it and automate the parts that are just drop dead black and white and leave the professional judgment, I guess, parts for later. And it now comes back, I believe, and says to the student while they're filling it out online, or at least for their own printout, it looks like the answers you gave show us, yes, you're a Texas resident, no, you're not, or maybe we need to review your case further. So that kind of can help possibly in those situations. We actually run into the case at the public institutions where a student realizes he's been paying non-resident tuition for the last 2 years, but didn't pay a lot of attention because they were getting financial aid that was covering those costs, so their bills were being paid.
And then finally it dawns on them they shouldn't be paying that high a tuition rate. So having a statement come to that student saying you are being classified as a resident or a non-resident probably is a real good move. I like that idea. Okay. This last year or so, it was hard to believe they can do it, but it got a little messier about residency. And that's that the federal government came up with their program for deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA. You have in your handouts a table, if I can pick it up, that looks like this. This is actually a federal form that kind of explains how DACA works. But basically what happens is that a student who qualifies under these provisions, and we're talking about students who are undocumented, students who are here without immigration papers, and therefore they are subject to deportation and other kinds of charges. The deferred action phrase in that title has to do with giving them a temporary reprieve from that kind of prosecution. And so the students who qualify for this are given typically or perhaps a Social Security number, while before they could not qualify one. They can be given a work authorization form, whereas before they could not illegally work in the country. Main thing to say, we've just been talking about what is a way to establish domicile in Texas, and one of them is employment. This does not change the fact that this person is a non-immigrant resident in the state of Texas. Now, if the DACA student graduated high school in Texas after living here 36 months and lived here the year prior to enrolling in college, they're still by state law classified as a resident. But without DACA, they could not get state work study because they couldn't legally work in the country. But with the work authorization, suddenly they have eligibility for a state work study job. That is the only real change for these students as far as financial aid is concerned from our standpoint. Having DACA status does not make you a resident. What would make you a resident is the 36-month approach. So it isn't a shortcut to being classified as a resident. Okay, so are there any questions about this? Have you seen some of these students show up? The other thing that you really want to be aware of is because you're probably changing their ID numbers in your system, you're moving from a school assigned number to the Social Security number they now have. Be sure and bring that change of ID to the attention of Raphael for the TEG records. You probably ought to notify the loan people if they're getting any kind of state loans. And the reason I say this is that one of the things that happens in TEG and all of the other programs is that we report to the legislature on graduation rates, persistence rates, all this kind of stuff. And the only way we know student A that Jane was here last year and the year before and the year before that is that we have their ID, that we can track them through the system. If they change IDs, as far as that process is concerned, they dropped out when that ID changed. And so now suddenly at your institution, your persistence rate went down because the student is no longer under that ID. And for the program itself, for TEG, we now have a lower persistence rate than it should have been because those students are continuing, but with a different number. So the private institutions have to submit the CBM 001 report. That will be a place, there is a CBM 00N as in Nancy report used to report changes in IDs. You really want to get everything lined up with the new number when a student gets a new number so that, again, when you're reporting the student being a renewal TEG recipient and they have a Social Security number now, and last year they had a student ID. you'll get a rejection in the end of your report because there's no record of that student having gotten an IY, unless you tell Raphael that that number is now this number. Yes, Connie.
I just have a comment. Could you just remind everyone, or I'll just remind you, please don't send Social Security numbers in email.
Right.
We ask that you use a secure method or send, some way, or call him and give the number over the phone. Just don't send it through the email. Thanks.
Right. We share, sometimes, don't fax it to us, because when you fax it to us, it sits in this open bin until someone comes by and picks it up and distributes it. So you want to send it through any personally identifiable data you want to send through secure protocol. Okay, I believe that's it. My basic rules for residency is to use the most simple approach as you can. If a student qualifies through the 36-month approach, rejoice and be glad in it and use that approach. Don't do all of the work with the domicile and so forth. But if they don't qualify through that, please don't assume that they're ineligible. Recognize that you need to look at those other questions for those students who can't qualify through the 36-month approach. Okay, any questions on residency? Okay, why don't we take a 10-minute break?
15-minute break is in the
right. 15-minute break.
So 10:45?
We will see you at 10:45. Thanks, guys. Remember, refreshments are here. The restrooms, if you go out the door that you came in and turn right, they're in the center of this main hallway. Thank you.
Ready to continue? Shh. You in the back. I'm watching you. Erica, I got you. All right. All right. We're going to move on now. We're going to talk about some of the reports that need to be sent in for the TEG program. I'm going to make sure I hit the correct button. Yay, me. There we go. All right. Reporting. We're going to talk about the needs survey, the progress report, year-end report, something new that you're allowed to do that you can do now. Started last year, but with more emphasis this year. Summer updates, and, of course, the audit report. Now, the needs survey goes out in early September, and I have not sent it out yet, but I'll explain why in a second. Deadline is November 7th. Again, the needs survey is what we send out to the schools. We ask the schools to give us information on every student, report every student at your institution that would be eligible to receive TEG. It's kind of one of those things. Suppose we had, $1 billion to give out in TEG, and we had enough money to give awards to every student, eligible student at your institution. You place them under the needs survey and send that in to us. It's kind of like a supreme wish list is what you do. Okay? See something here? Now, question. I've had this before. Some schools were under the impression that putting a student on this needs survey meant that you had to give the student an award, either this year or next. Is that true? Nope. Schools still have the authority to determine actually whom gets an award. See something here, the next one. Okay, see something here. Now, of course, to be included in the survey, the student does have to meet all the pertinent eligibility requirements. If they have not been given an award as of yet, they have to meet all the IY award requirements. If the student is currently receiving a renewal award, they have to meet all the renewal award eligibility requirements, and so they have to meet the appropriate requirements to be included on the survey. Again, you exclude a renewal award recipient if they're not meeting the appropriate SAP requirements. Now, this year, one of the reasons that it's taken a little bit longer for me to get it out is I had a few schools to where the needs survey would come in, student had an EFC below $1,000, had a adjusted need of $40,000, but they reported only giving the student $3,000. So my system, the little survey, the little worksheet I had where it did the edit check stuff, had an issue with it. Said, why aren't you giving the student a full award? Turns out it was actually being limited by a tuition differential. But on the old form, the one from last year, there was no field, nothing to indicate tuition differential is limiting the student's awards being reported. So they had to contact me, and I had to check everything and go, oh, okay, this one. They're all appropriate issues because tuition differential limiting. So this year, this is a form we'll be sending out eventually, probably next day or two. You'll see column J, tuition differential. Instead of this is where you're going to report that yes or no, it is a limiting factor. I'm not going to be asking for the specific tuition differential amount. It's a little bit too much. Don't need to know that. Just yes or no. Is the amount being reported in columns K and or L, are they being limited by tuition differential? So that's the new field that's going to be out this coming needs survey. Now, as a result also of that one field being added, there were 4 new fields that were added to the worksheet that analyzes the survey data. These worksheets, of course, are going to validate whether or not that what you put in column J is accurate. It should be Y or N, not a W, not a T, not a 4. It's going to make sure that it's a yes or a no. And then the other new fields are going to confirm that the award amounts for the students either reported with or without a tuition differential limitation, whether or not that they're accurate. And again, the worksheet's still going to do what it did last year. It's still going to give you immediate scrutiny of your data records. It's going to immediately notify you of, hey, wait a minute, the information you reported is a little bit inaccurate. There's something funny about it. Take a look at it. Review the record. All right? Because again, the needs survey is what we use to determine what next year's initial allocation for you is going to be. This needs survey is extremely important. It is what we use to determine what you get next year. And right here, I've got circled in red the 4 new error checks columns. You can see here I'm finding out, again, is it a yes or a no? Is the TE NEG being maxed accidentally when you're saying that, hey, wait a minute, there is a tuition difference limitation, but yet a full amount was being reported? You can see right there. It's just simple little edit checks. That way you don't have to worry about going through them one at a time or having to spend several hours trying to make sure your needs survey data is accurate. This sucker takes care of it for you in a heartbeat. Take a look here as an example. We've got here 2 students. Let me see here real quick. You should look from here. You can see that both of these students right here have an EFC above $1,000, so they don't qualify for any exceptional need. But you can see on the first one that the student does not have a tuition differential limitation. And yet the record is entered as only receiving $3,000. Hence why the system and the appropriate column found an issue with it. You need to report a full $3,250 for this student. Why $3,000? Just data entry error. And the second student, it was reported that yes, there is a tuition differential limitation, but yet the student was reported as receiving the full $3,250, which is inaccurate. So again, the system found an issue with that entry as well, with that data. Question. Suppose the information that you've entered into the needs survey is accurate, and yet my survey worksheet, the little error check worksheet, is still finding issues with it. What do? I'm sorry? Call me. I want to see you after the session. Thank you. No, that's correct. Just contact me and we'll work it out. We'll figure out what's going on. Why is this accurate information? How is it accurate? How do we get around it? We'll take care of it. Not a problem. We'll work with you. It's not a problem. But I've done the best that I can to make sure that this analyzation worksheet just does it all for us. Quick and simple. Make it much quicker task than what it used to be. I remember before it would just take a long time to have to go through everything. I'm trying to make it as simple as I can for you. And of course, next comes the progress report. It's usually distributed in late January and it's due by February 20th. What that is we kind of do a program check in the year to make sure that the monies that have been allocated to you, that you've spent all the monies you can, you've requested everything that you can, that you're up on top of making sure students are getting their money. What we also do is that as of the February 20th deadline, schools that have not dispersed or encumbered all of their funds. The monies are collected, and usually what they're done is they're pulled together and given to schools that have requested additional monies that have spent all of their original allocation. Of course, as you remember, there have been some years where we collected the monies that weren't spent, kept it. We all got new cars that year. No. But usually what we try to do is do a reallocation is what we try to do with the money. It just depends on what we're told can be done with the monies at that time. And right here is a copy of the report from the prior year, FY13. You can see where it asks for how much money you spent, how many students you've given it to, and of course at the bottom there are the requests for additional funds. If you have dispersed or encumbered all of your original allocation, that's where you would say, I need this amount of money for these many more students. It's all done that way. Now the year-end report. Of course, it's distributed in early May. Deadline used to be June 15th, but we pushed it back to July 15th this past year. Now, whether or not we keep it that way, we're kind of debating on it because we were informed of several issues with additional reports, additional things that all happened at the same time. It may have been a little too much. We're still working on that, but at this point in time, we're still using July 15th as the deadline. And of course, this report, of course, verifies that your institutions are adhering to program award requirements, IY and RY SAP award requirements, that we're confirming that what you say you've dispersed matches what we say we've given to you, and of course, identify students whose socials are not on file with our agency. These warnings are usually more of just a warning, more of a notification. Hey, take a look at this. Here's a list of students whose socials are in your year-end report are not on a CBM report. Don't have to worry about resolving them at this time, but you're going to need to resolve them later in the year when you submit your FAS report. This is more just kind of like a heads up. You may have some issues with this later. That's what the year-end report does for y'all. Now, one of the things about the year-end report, it is a fixed length field format, fixed length format. Each field asked required to be submitted has to be of that certain length, even if it's like, say, a middle initial. If they don't have one, you have to put one space. It has to be a space, and you can't just skip it. It's not tab delimited. It's fixed length. Every space has to be accounted for. Other thing that we've had issues with is justification. Everything has to be left justified as specifically numbers. And I've got some examples here. Sometimes we had people report that they gave an award amount of space 3518. They gave somebody a $3,518 award. Well, space 3518. The system reads as $35.18. The correct way to implement it would have been 351800. The last two digits are the decimal places, the cents. Okay. Same thing for hours, be it completed, attempted, or whatever it may be. We had schools do space 15 for 15 hours attempted. Well, the system reads it as 1.5. That last digit is a decimal place. So 150 is the appropriate entry. So just little things like that, just pop up. Easily correctable, but it's like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that. That's all right. Okay, question. An RY recipient did not meet program SAP requirements at the end of this year. Okay. You're planning to issue the student a professional judgment or a hardship decision to grant the student an award next year. Since you're going to do that, can you go ahead and report yes in the end of year file that the student is going to be able to get an award next year? The answer? No. The information that is entered into the end of year report has to reflect the decision entered for MET SAP for the year. And again, it could be several reasons as to why the student didn't meet SAP. They started in the spring semester, therefore an undergraduate could only complete 12 hours before the year was over. Or the student graduated in December and didn't take any spring classes. So they're not going to meet RY SAP requirements at the end of the year. Even if you have plans to do something, a hardship decision or professional judgment to give that student an award next year, what has to be entered on the end of year report is that yes or no for METSAP has to be based on the information in the student record, not what you plan to do. Okay? Okay. A student transferred to your institution for the spring semester and was given a renewal award. You know that you can only report the work accomplished at your school, completed at your school, on the end of year report, but you have his transcript from the other school. The transcript shows that it proves that he is eligible to receive an RY award next year. Can you go ahead and say, yes, he met SAP requirements? The answer is no. The answer, because you're only allowed to report what the student completed at your school if they only there for one semester and they did not meet the appropriate eligibility requirements. You have to report no if they did not meet it. Even though you'll be able to confirm with it later through both of them, you can work with me and confirm eligibility from 1 and 2, institution A, institution B. Together, it shows the student met SAP. You have to report what he accomplished report yes or no based on what's attempted and completed at your institution. Another thing that we had a lot of problems with, a lot of schools had issues with, were students coming up with errors of invalid initial award, never awarded, or invalid renewal award, awarded before. A lot of times what this may have been is a student who obtained a social security number mid-year, or from one year to then, from last year to now, they've got a social, or it was a transfer student and they don't have a social. So one school had one student ID. The students come to your transfer to your school. The students give it a different student ID. It's not going to be in the system. So what we do is this year, what I did is I created a spreadsheet to send to the schools via secure email, detailing these records. Here are the students with the invalid renewal award issue. Here are the students with the invalid initial award issue. And I either asked you for the IY award information if you're telling me that, yes, hey, this student is a renewal award recipient, but the last time they got it was prior to 2009 when we started doing end-of-year reports. End-of-year reports. Okay? We've got an example here. So like for the top, if you get the invalid renewal award, what I asked what the schools to do is to give me what institution gave them the initial award, what was the fiscal year they got it in, what semester was it for, okay? And what I do is I take your end-of-year file, the renewal record, and create an IY record with it, inserting this information into it, put it into the system. That way when we rerun your file, you no longer get that invalid renewal award error. I have to create an initial year record for the student. I base it on your end-of-year record. The other issue, of course, is the invalid initial award. You thought that there was that this was the first time the student ever got a TEG award. Turns out that student's identification number, student ID number, is already in the system. Okay? If that be the case, then what I do is I send to you this information. Here's where here's the school where the student last got a TEG award, which fiscal year, which semester, all right? For their IY award. In case there's multiple records, I give you the IY information, and I also identify in what was the last year the student got a TEG award, and was the student meeting SAP at the end of that year. I send that information to you so you can re-review it and reevaluate whether or not that is a valid and an eligible TEG award recipient. So I kind of did a little bit of this just to, instead of you having to do the research for you and asking around, I try to give as much of as I can for you or from you to get the process done a little bit more quickly. Anybody have any questions or comments about this? All right. Summer updates. Now what we do here is at this point in time, schools can submit a summer update file to update fiscal year 13 information, fiscal year that just passed. Now, of course, the year-end report, we ask you to identify information completed as of the spring semester. Student may have finished that school year, that semester, not meeting SAP requirements. Student then takes and completes summer coursework to regain eligibility. Well, we don't know about that because you've already turned in your end-of-year report. Instead of having to resubmit your end-of-year report, revise it, resubmit it, we created a system to where you only submit summer update information. Okay? So what it is what you can do is it's best to submit a summer update file if the student regains SAP after completing summer coursework, or at some point in time maybe prior year SAP was reported inaccurately. I've had just a couple of issues. Student completed 30 hours, 100% completion rate, GPA at 3.9. Did they meet SAP? No. It was just an error. So you can use the summer update file to correct it. As opposed to, I don't have the authority, it's a little bit of an invalid change for me just to go in and change records. You can't trace that. So what we did is we came up with this summer update file system to document changes appropriately. And we do have, let's see something here, even though I say summer update instructions can be found on the GSP website, they're included in the packet that was given to you. You take a look at there, all the full instructions of what to do, how to submit it, everything. The fields that need to be reported, all that information that can be updated. That summer update instruction manual is in the handouts that are available to you right now. Anybody any questions about that summer update file? Anybody submitted anything of that nature so far? No? Okay. All right, we'll move on then. All right. The next big report that we deal with is, of course, the audit report, sent out in early March, and it's due April 15th the following year. Audit confirms that awards were given to eligible students only, and that institutions have internal controls to ensure that they're adhering to program regulations and laws. Question. School has internal auditors. Can they perform the audit? The answer? Yes. If your institution has an audit office that is independent of the financial aid office, financial aid and dispersing offices, then those internal auditors can do the audit. If not, it's going to have to be an external auditor, an outside entity that conducts the audit on your institution. Okay, question. Audit reports are supposed to be based on a sample of at least 50 TEG recipients or 5% of the recipient pool, whichever is greater. But your school has less than 50 recipients. Is it true that your audit only has to review 5 awardees? Anybody know? Yep. As long as your auditor has already determined that compliance controls are both in place and effectively working, and that control risk is low, a school that has less than 50 award recipients can do the audit on 5 awardees, on a 5 recipient sample. Allocations.
Raphael?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There is possibly going to be, or in fact there probably will be, a change in the audit requirements for independent institutions. I don't know that the TEG angle will change much, but in Senate Bill 215, which was the Coordinating Board Sunset Bill, there were some provisions about expanding the scope of the audit function at the private institutions to cover all state programs that they're participating in. This is new stuff. We don't know how it's going to be interpreted or implemented, but the possibility or probability is there, excuse me, that the audit that you're now doing for TEG could be expanded to include things like Be On Time and Cal, other programs that you participate in, maybe work study. So we will keep you as informed as we can as that develops, but you now know as much as I do about where this might go. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm asking a question, even though you said you've told me everything. Is this going to imply that we'll all of a sudden have student-by-student reports to do now on work study and Cal and Be On Time like we do TEG?
I can't imagine it going that way. Work study is a very small program, and so the student-by-student report I don't see that as happening. Be On Time and Cal, they have records from you through the loan applications. See, one of the reasons we have the end-of-year reports is that is the first time we know who got the awards. And so that's the significant function of those year-end reports. The main thing that I can see this happening is that when they come to do an audit, or when your audit is being done, that they will have to look at records for these other programs. But again, we will get more information to you as soon as we have it. Carol, I see you're here. Is there anything that you wanted to say on this, or is that adequate for the moment?
Online listers.
The changes in Senate Bill 215 that have to do with audits were made because the legislature felt they had to say something about private institutions, because the particular provision had been designed with public institutions in mind, and most of them are so large that they have internal auditors, and most of our institutions are so small that they only have external auditors. And there really wasn't any thinking about whether or not there would be other programs audited. It was just a matter of allowing the external audits to serve the purpose they've always served for TEG. Now, how the actual words will get interpreted once they get here, there's not really legislative history, because nobody had a debate about these provisions on the floor, and that's what you have to have in order to determine legislative intent. But I would just say that was not what they had in their minds when they created those provisions.
Okay, well, as I understand it, and again, this is rumor more than anything else, this is in the hands of our internal audit staff, and so we'll, as we find out more about it, we'll share it with the institutions. And that's about as far as we can go at this point. Thank you.
Anybody else? Alrighty, we'll keep on going here. Talk about allocations. For allocations, we'll talk about just a quick hit on the appropriations, and then we'll get into how we calculate the original allocation amounts and prior year comparisons. Every biennium, the Texas legislature, it determines the amount that's going to be awarded through the TEG program for the following 2 fiscal years. All right, so appropriation amounts usually aren't confirmed until June of that legislative year. So every other year, it's one of those things where we give you an estimated allocation, and we don't know if we can confirm that until the governor signs the final documents and whatnot. So every other year, it's kind of like, this is what we think we're going to give you. And award accordingly. Now, calculating the allocation amounts. What we do is the information that we obtain from your TEG needs survey. I enter it onto a master spreadsheet. Here's a picture of what it looks like, part of it, right? Each data element, each survey data element has its own column and is totaled for each school and put all together and things of that nature. You can see it's all listed right there. This is what it's going to look like for the upcoming fiscal year. Now, what I do is, after entering the information, additional data elements are also created to determine the initial allocation amounts. One of them is something we call adjusted TEG need. It's a result of the following calculation. I take your TEG need total and add it to half of your exceptional need total. Then, of course, I put all this together in a column. We get a grand total of all of the adjusted TEG need for all schools. What you have reported to me your school could use, all gets tabulated and totaled. Then what I do is I create a field called need share. What I do there is I take each school's adjusted TEG need and divide it by the grand total to determine a percentage. This is what percentage of the monies your school is eligible to receive. Final column I create, final data element, is your initial allocation. I multiply your need share percentage against the appropriated amount for the fiscal year. So it's a little bit, it sounds really simple, and it somewhat is. It's just a matter of resolving issues with the needs survey, making sure that you're claiming all the money that you were supposedly eligible to receive if the program were fully funded. That's the one thing I try to get across to schools is don't leave out anybody because you cheat yourself out of your percentage. Try to include everybody you can, everybody who's eligible to be entered on the needs survey. By all means, please include them in there. Now what I do is once I've determined the upcoming year initial allocations, I compare them against what's going on with the current year. Compare upcoming year with the current year. If a significant discrepancy exists, what I do is I actually take a look at your survey data element totals and do a confirmation, each of them from year to year. Last year you said you needed, $150 million in TEG need. Well, last year, this coming year, you said you only needed 120. I take a look at students. Oh, okay, last year shows you had 15,000 eligible students. This coming year, you only have 12,000, hence the reduction. Things I take a look at that to see, make sure that there's a valid explanation for it, something that looks attributable to that. If I see there's something strange, something doesn't look right, it's too significant of a discrepancy, I'll contact your institution. I'm going to confirm you included everybody, or that you may have included too many people. I'm going to confirm that with you. Hey, you doubled the number of recipients you had last year. What happened? What's going on? Did you have that much of a population explosion, enrollment explosion? What's going on? I'm going to try and confirm, make sure what's being reported is correct. And again, confirm once again, reconfirm the accuracy of all the data element totals. Again, that edit worksheet I put in there should be doing all of that, but you never know. There could be something going on that just wasn't explainable, and I'd like to find out what it is. I don't want you being cheated. I don't want you getting less than what you deserve to be receiving. Again, discussing other reasons for the discrepancies. I'm going to work with you to find out what is going on. Make sure that what you submitted is accurate, you're comfortable with it, and we roll with it. And I blaze through that. All right. Any questions, anybody? Now, I do have one question. Someone was brought to me during the break, and I neglected to bring it up at the beginning of this part of the workshop. It concerns doctoral students. How many institutions here, how many of y'all have doctoral student programs? Okay, got a couple of them. What do y'all consider full-time for your doctoral students? Is it 9 hours? Is it 9 hours? Because we've six for you as well. Okay, because I've had a school comment to me that again they have some doctoral programs where they and I can't remember. Would you mind explaining to me who it was that you said you got confirmed that you could consider 6 hours to be full time?
Probably SACS.
SACS, that may have been that one.
I don't know, but there was some review process in the past to say that we consider 6 to be a full-time doctoral load.
Okay. SACS did it for you as well? Okay. That's the first time I heard about that, and of course it was brought up about how SAP requirements, eligibility for graduate students, 9 hours completed each year. Well, if 6 hours is being considered full-time for a doctoral student, 12 for the year is not meeting TEG SAP requirements for a renewal award. So if out there, any other schools out there, if you want to comment on that, please do as well. But I'll start taking a look into that to see what can be done, if anything can be done. I'll take a look at it. But it's the first I've heard about that. And if that is something that this sort of 6 hour full-time for doctoral students is actually limiting them from being considered eligible for TEG, that needs to, in my opinion, needs to be addressed, and I'll see what we can do about that. I'll just start talking about it and see what's going on. Yes, Jane.
Do you know how they are reported in the CBM reports? How the being full-time enrolled is defined for your statewide reports? And is that, yes, sir?
Pretty much since our courses are at 3 hour
increments. 6 hours is full-time, 3 is half. They're either full or half. There's no 3/4, 1/4 for them. So.
We will need to look at how this is handled by the agency as a whole. We don't want TEG to be out of sync with everything else that's being done. But again, a valid question that we will take a look at, see what we can do.
Anybody have any other questions or concerns or something I want to discuss? Anything else? It doesn't have to be about reporting or anything else like that. Something, a question that you had or have thought about now?
Okay, Raphael, it looks like we're a little early. We were scheduled to break at noon and be back at 1, so we're going to go ahead and break for lunch, and maybe you'll beat the crowds at wherever you're going to get your lunch. And if you can be back here at 12:30, we have our loan program area scheduled to come on in at 12:30, so maybe we can get you out earlier this afternoon so you can get on the road back to where you need to go. So we'll break for lunch, and we'll see you back here at 12:30.
Thank you all.
Residency, and here's the question. Do the parents of a dependent student have to be either a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident of the U.S., even if the student meets the living in Texas during the 36 months leading to high school graduation path, which is path 2 in residency?
Okay. As we talked about during the presentation, if a person, the nice thing about the 36-month approach is it's really dependent on what the student does and not what's going on with the parents. So the student who has met the 36-month approach in the year prior to enrollment, it doesn't matter what's going on with the parents. One thing that comes up, you'll see someone start high school and then the parents get transferred out of state and the student stays behind, graduates with their class, and so forth. And those parents may still be claiming the student as a dependent, or they may be international people or whatever. As long as the student is here, they can be considered a resident. Now, what can get tricky is if the student is here on an H-2 visa and then they age out of the H-2 visa and become an F-1 visa. Now, then they have a real problem because they're put in a position of signing an affidavit, which is a legal document saying, I plan to apply for permanent resident status, and they have an F-1 visa for which they are swearing that they plan to go back to their home country. So once, if and when they reach an F-1 status, that whole issue needs to be re-examined by the student as to whether they want to go forward with that. It could also put the college in an awkward situation. But just in terms of being able to qualify under the 36-month approach, even though the parents are out of state or whatever, that definitely is the student's option. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Albert Contreras, and I'm one of the managers in the loan department. In fact, I supervise the loan origination area. It's our job to be sure that we take in all those applications that come in, process them as quickly as possible, and get the money out to you all as quickly and to the students as quickly as possible within the constraints of federal guidelines and such. On behalf of the loan program, of course, we want to welcome you, and we want to thank you for allowing us a little time to just go over real quickly some of our loan programs and some information. Well, before we get started, just a couple of real quick introductions. Part of the presentation will be handled by Davin Burt. Davin's back hiding in the corner. He's one of our loan representatives and loan processors. Been with us 6, 7 years now, Davin? 7. Sitting right next to him is Michelle Williams. Michelle is my counterpart. We dish out the money, and Michelle's job is to be sure the students do what they're supposed to after that, deferments, forbearance, and ultimately to be sure that the money gets back to us. We have Janie Miramontes, who is the boss of us all. She is the director over the loan program. And sitting in the back is Catherine Carson, who serves as our legislative liaison. She keeps us in touch and in line with federal regulations and state regulations also. So with that, we'll move on. We're going to kind of share the podium up here running through things. Davin's going to do part. Davin will handle the items here that are for the college access loan. Real briefly, he's going to talk about origination fees and how origination fees impact annual percentage rates. We know that in the world of private loans, the focus seems to be on what's the rate. And we know there's some concern with origination fees. He's going to cover that just real quickly with some real examples. He's also going to talk a little bit about future funding for the CAL program, what the interest rates are, the origination fee structure that's coming in the next academic year. Online messages, I don't know if any of you all have noticed that there's a different look to the screens now as you log in if you're in the loan programs. And some of the online reporting, kind of a refresher on that. We also have Michelle who will take the first bullet for Be On Time. Her area handles the forgiveness aspect of Be On Time. And then I'll come up and try to address some of the legislative changes to Be On Time that take effect for the 2014 and 2015 academic year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Davin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Albert said, my name is Davin Burt. I've been with the agency for about 7 years as a loan representative, going on 8 almost. So I've been around a little while. So I may have spoken with some of you if you deal with the college access loan or Be On Time loan programs. And it's nice to see some new faces. Well, like Albert said, I'm going to go over a little bit of the college access loan program and a few of some bullet points that we think are important. For those of you that don't know or not familiar with the college access loan program, it's a credit-based loan program, our primary program that we offer for students. It's based on a fixed rate of 5.25% currently. We also have an origination fee, which can be either 3 or 5%, depending on credit reviews of the borrower and the student, and the cosigner. I want to kind of touch on kind of the structure of our loan and how that works with the fees and our interest. So we have 2 examples here. One of a $10,000 loan, one of a $25,000 loan. And each are, in this example, are at a 5% origination fee. We have disbursement dates that are close to one another, graduation dates that are the same year. And if we go and look at the APRs, it's interesting because when people think about origination fees, they get kind of nervous. Oh, how's that going to affect the loan? It's going to jack up my price. Well, these examples show that even for a $10,000 loan, the APR turns out to be only 5.62% on a $10,000 loan. And going to a $25,000 loan, which the repayment would be a little longer, so the APR you're looking at is only 5.61%. So even with that origination fee, it doesn't really, affect the loan that much as far as the APR goes. I know that the Plus loan, I think their APR starts out about 6.4%. And there's some private loans. I saw one private loan the other day. Their APR for their fixed rate loan starts at like 5.7. So we're extremely competitive in that regard. So students definitely don't have to worry about that side of it with our loan program. Want to go on? Future funding. CAL is our primary program, like I said, and it's going to be here for the students if they need funds. Our board has made arrangements to make sure that the CAL will be there. We'll not be running out of money. So if students need it, they always know they can go to that CAL loan, apply, and get the money they need for school. Interest rates. 5.25 is our current rate. It has been for the last few years. We hope to continue that going in the future, but currently it's just a flat 5.25 simple interest loan. This next slide piece is very exciting. We're going to be going to a new origination fee structure for the 14-15 academic year. Very excited about it. It's going to affect those origination fees in that now there's going to be a tiered kind of program where the origination fee can be 0%, can be 3%, or 5%. Now that will all be based on the highest credit score of either the borrower or the cosigner. So currently, in order to be approved, a borrower or cosigner needs to have at least a 700 Vantage score. So in the future, if someone has around, higher than a 700 or around there, it'll be a 0% origination fee. If it's right around the 700, it'll be about 3%. If it's under 700, it'll be about 5. We'll have particulars, as we get closer, but that'll be about the ranges that they'll need to get those specific tiers. So excited about that, and definitely more information will be coming as we get closer to next fall. Are there any questions? I'm sorry. If you have any questions, feel free. Raise your hand. I can definitely do my best to answer those. And also y'all online as well. Okay. The ranges will be for a 0% origination fee. Typically, it's going to be higher than 700 on the Vantage score. And that could be either the borrower or the cosigner, whomever credit report score is higher, then we'll take that, we'll use that to determine the origination fee. So it'll be 0% over 7, 3% right around the 7 area. And like I said, we haven't gotten real particulars yet, but that's around the range. And then under 700 will be the 5%. You're welcome. Okay, so online status messages, another exciting thing. We've had online status messages for students to see where they are in the process of their application. Kind of tells them if their documentation is in, if they need a cosigner, if the cosigner's credit's been approved. Well, now you as financial aid administrators will be able to see the same information if you pull up a student. We've got some feedback on this already. Schools definitely love this because they get the specific information they need when a student's in their office. Because I know a lot of times students will come and say, I don't know why this loan's not going through. Well, now you can go online, pull up the student and say, okay, yeah, you still need your promissory note, or your cosigner, they don't have his documentation yet, or her documentation yet. So we think that this tool will definitely help out on a day-to-day, student-to-student basis. So we're very excited about that. So you don't have to give us a call and sit here and wait and go through all that. I mean, we love speaking with you, but we know your time is valuable, and you like to get those students in and out. I mean, I've been there too, having worked on campuses. So you now have a new tool that we've been waiting for a year, but we got it out there and available, so definitely use it and enjoy it. Now, what you'll be seeing is kind of this example. I mean, it's going to look a little bit differently than what you're used to previously, but for the most part, it's going to be the same information, but you'll see added in the current status area, there's a link that says click here for status. And if you were to click on that link, then you would get this page that will come up with kind of a recap of the student's loan information, loan period, amount, school, common law, unique ID. And then below that, under the status as of area, you'll see there'll be a required document section for the student. So it lets you know if the student provided their documentation or not. In this example, the student documents promissory note and self-certification form were received, so it'll say that. Student credit, this is a CAL, so if the student applied for credit, which in this case they did and were approved, it says that, as well as cosigner is optional. Then if the cosigner provided information, waiting for cosigner application and promissory note, it would also give you information. If the cosigner was not approved, it would say cosigner not approved, new cosigner needed or something to that effect. So, this information hopefully will be very valuable to you all when you're dealing with those students. And for the Be On Time loan, Those will only have 2 lines. It'll just be the required documents line and the processing status line, because credit is not required or needed. So it'll be a little bit smaller. But this is a gist of what you'll be seeing now when you pull up a student. Okay, online reporting. We've gone over online reporting in past seminars and workshops, but we just want to kind of give you a brief overview for some that may not have seen this information, just so you can use that to assist in processing loans and seeing who's ready to be certified, who's not, that type of thing. The reports kind of go through these different areas. We have application reports, which kind of focus on the application side of things prior to you certifying a loan. We have the certified applications in process, things that you've certified that the student has not completed. Also certified applications, no funds available, which we know you all never certify loans when you don't have allocation. But just in case it happens, just to let you know, there's a report for that. Uncertified applications in process, these are, of course, applications that have not been certified that the student still needs to provide documentation or information on. Uncertified pre-approved applications, that's the listing where student has done everything's ready to go. All you need to do is certify, and you can pretty much 99.9% expect the student to do the final step so that they can receive their funds. Then we also have loan and disbursement reports. We have dispersed loan reports, which list all the students whose loan has been dispersed. We also have the pending future disbursements, where they've done everything, they've done their loan terms, and we're just waiting for the money to get to you. So that's an important report as well. And then also pending disbursements need documents. Typically on that report, student just needs to do the final loan terms, and that's it. Everything else is done. And we'll show you a few examples of these reports. This is the kind of the interface when you go in. This is not exactly what you'll see. I mean, it's very similar. This is kind of our view of it. But when you do go in, we suggest that you use the summary so that you can see both programs and the information for both, but also choose the active report on the output options on the far end, because that will allow you to sort and filter information as you need it, so you can kind of manipulate it to best use it for you. It also provides capabilities to export to Excel if you like working with those type of spreadsheets. So here's the uncertified pre-approved applications report. This is the report where if you're wanting to certify loans, Cal loans for students, you go to this report. It lists each student, their information. Social information is left off this example, but you will see social information, that type of thing. So you would be able to go in, see your students. Okay, I have these students, they're ready to go. I'll go in, pull up their accounts, certify, and send it out so they can finalize it. So it's all in one area. You don't have to guess or wonder if they've completed everything. These students are all done, pre-approved, ready to go. This is the dispersed loans report, and I'll show you this just because you can go to this report and see when a loan has extracted. For us, when we send out loans, it extracts first, which means we pretty much request the funds from the State Comptroller's Office to be sent to you all. And then in 3 business days after this extract date, money arrives at the school. So you may see someone on this list and you're wondering, okay, did we receive it or not? You'll see the extract date, and then you'll be able to count the 3 business days and say, yes, we should have funds for this person, or no, maybe it's still coming, or that type of thing. Or you can kind of figure out what day funds came in for a student so that you can kind of work that. Have a question?
Davin, we have a question from a school. Are students required to file the FAFSA if they wish to borrow from the CAL program?
For that, we highly recommend that they do, because it's much easier for a school to determine their eligibility. We know we do have some instances where students just don't want to do it. And really, they can apply, but we suggest that they do try to put the FAFSA information in, because in some instances they could be shorting themselves from receiving Cal eligibility, because for you as schools, you'd have to determine, hey, okay, this person's eligible for full, federal eligibility. Whereas if they provided that FAFSA information, maybe they would have more eligibility than you all would be able to set up for them.
Davin makes a good point. It's not required necessarily that they do the FAFSA. There is, and those of you who handle our Cal loan know there's an IRS rule that you're obligated to follow. Basically, our state Cal loans were never intended to replace federal loan monies. So if a person doesn't, and this IRS rule that we publish, it's out on our website, basically says that if there's any eligibility for federal loans, then that has to be taken into consideration when calculating how much of a Cal loan a student can have. So if they choose not to, refuse to, don't, then you pretty much have to assume they would have gotten the full amount of federal loans and use that in your calculation. I hope that made sense.
Hopefully that answered your question. Out there, anyone else have any questions? Okay, I think we have one more. Pending disbursements need documents. This report kind of gives you an idea of loans that have been certified by you all already, but the student just needs to do their last step of completing the loan terms on our website. So if you're having students come in or they have questions, I've done everything. Well, you can look at this report, and if they're listed here, they still need to do the final loan terms. And if you look at the last three columns, it kind of gives the different kind of documents a student needs before their loan can go through. You'll see the promissory note received. There's yeses there. The self-certification received, you'll see a date there. And then the final column, loan terms accepted, it's blank. So that's the final thing that the student would need in order for the loan to fund and for money to be sent to you all. So, you have a question?
Is this on? Okay. I have a quick question in regards to the disbursement roster for the Cal loan. When we receive that disbursement roster, when the funds are transmitted, kind of the way that we distinguish whether it's a 3% or 5% is we just have to, kind of manually calculate it. Is there any, hope for the future, just looking down the road of you guys, of possibly tagging the loans with, the 3% or 5% on the report? Or I just wanted to, bring that to attention.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's nothing that distinguishes the two on any of our information. Albert, did you have?
Well, I think up to this point, about 95% of all students, because of the way we had the origination fee structured, where it takes both the student and the cosigner to pass the credit evaluation to get that lower 3% origination fee, there weren't a lot of students and cosigners who both met that threshold. So I think last time we looked, maybe about 95% of all students required a cosigner, which equates to about 95% of all of them being at the 5% origination fees. Now, in the new structure that's coming in next year, that's very definitely something we need to consider, because then you'll have 3 potential origination fees, which obviously affect the net getting to you. So that's something we'll definitely look at, possibly posting it as a online status message. We'll look into that. Not quite sure how that'll work.
Well, I think this is the last slide from me. I'm sorry.
Red on, or is it? Oh, okay. No, let me explain why we're asking that. We have to program our computer system to calculate the correct fee, but if a priori we don't know what it is, we're sitting there scrambling, figuring out what to do to make it work. If at least we can read easily off of the report, oh, okay, that's that much less time we have to spend scrambling. That's why.
I understand. It makes perfect sense.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll hand it off to Michelle.
afternoon. So again, I am Michelle Williams. I actually work on the servicing side of the loan program operations. And we just wanted to update you on a few bullet points regarding forgiveness for the Beyond Time loan that maybe everybody's not aware of. So the first thing is just that...
Cal?
Yes?
Before you get started, we have a question regarding Cal, regarding the FAFSA. Just want to make clear that a student does not have to file the FAFSA, but in certifying the loan for those students who don't, the school must assume that the student is eligible for the maximum federal direct loan according to their class standing. This is confusing because by virtue of choosing not to complete the FAFSA, the student is not eligible for federal student aid.
That may be true, but our guidelines and rules stipulate that you have to take it into account whether or not they choose to or not. Without knowing that they are or aren't eligible, the assumption has to be that they would be, which is another good reason for them to file.
And Albert, is it just federal loans or is it federal Pell Grant as well?
I believe the IRS rule says federal aid, which may be Pell. Perkins loans are included. I think the only thing that may be excluded would be PLUS loans, the parent loans.
It's almost, in my opinion, to the student's advantage, as they were trying to say, to go ahead and require that they fill out the FAFSA, because if they are eligible for a subsidized or a Pell, instead of just taking that into consideration against their eligibility, it would be nice to go ahead and be able to give them that advantage.
Okay. So in terms of forgiveness for the students, a forgiveness reminder letter is mailed to all BOT loan holders on a semi-annual basis. The letter just reiterates the same information as far as the criteria of forgiveness. That's available on the website. That's probably available at the school. Just the same information reminding them that they have a loan that can be forgiven if they meet the criteria, what the criteria are, and what they need to do in order to have the loan forgiven. Which takes us to the second point, which is that the forgiveness process actually starts with the loan holder. It's imperative that they know it's up to them to start the process, and that is, of course, completing the forgiveness eligibility form and taking that to the school to have that completed. Most of the time it's completed through the registrar's office, but that is what the students need to do in order to initiate the process. And then finally, each institution must have a current authorized official list on file with the coordinating board. And that is just so that we know who's completing the form, and the officers at the school know who's completing the form, who's authorized to complete the form. There have been times where we've needed to go back to the school because maybe the information provided wasn't correct, and we have someone that we can contact. Even if it's a lot of times we'll see forms that are completed by one person and the signature is a different person. So both of those people will actually need to be listed on the form. That is it. Were there any questions regarding forgiveness? Yes, ma'am.
For a Beyond Time recipient who meets the 4-year graduation time frame and graduates with a 2.99 GPA, is there any appeal process available?
There is not. Now, having said that, though, the student can. So if they attended more than one school, we ask that they send all of their transcripts so we can do a manual calculation to make sure that their GPA from a transfer school, sometimes that will get them over that, up to or over that 3.0. So that is a possibility, but there is no rounding. It is, either you meet it or you don't.
Hello. Okay. My question is, I know that we can get reports by request to see what status students are in if we're trying to be proactive and reach out to students to make sure they're doing the forgiveness paperwork. Is there any plans to make that something just readily available to schools?
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've thought about that before, but that might be a good idea. So if I understand you, something that would identify students that have not submitted their paperwork for forgiveness. It's not something that we have done, but we can do it. I'll get with Janie over there and we'll try to come up with something, but certainly feedback would be appreciated. I can tell you that we know there are some students who continue once they've gotten their undergraduate degree and go on and get their master's degree, and they don't think about doing the forgiveness until they've completed their graduate school. They can, because the Beyond Time only deals with the undergraduate. They don't have to wait that time frame. A lot of them, I guess, think once they're out of school, they're out of school, but they can easily still apply for the forgiveness, or not apply, but submit their application for the forgiveness, even if they're still going to graduate school. But that's something that we'll look at. Yes, ma'am.
Michelle, we have another question from a school. Again, we're going back to Cal. If the student does file the FAFSA and is eligible for an unsub Stafford, can they decline the unsub and receive the Cal in the same amount?
Albert, you can use this one if you want.
Yeah, the Cal loan cannot replace a federal loan. So unsub or sub, a Cal loan cannot replace that. So the student can either accept it or not, but yeah, we cannot take the place of a federal loan.
And that's the key to that IRS wording that, again, is published out there. Any federal aid that the student is eligible for, whether they accept it or not, has to be taken into consideration when calculating your Cal.
Any other forgiveness questions? Yes.
Is this on? I had a quick question. So our school offers an accelerated program for our undergrad students to receive their undergrad and their graduate degree in a program. So my question is, they do not receive their official undergrad diploma until they graduate with their master's degree after 5 years. So what would be, just to clarify, maybe the correct protocol for them to kind of submit their forgiveness paperwork before receiving their bachelor's degree, if that makes sense?
So for those students, actually, you wouldn't be able to submit it until, because they get both degrees at the same time, they would have to wait until they graduate. But what we ask for is, because we have to distinguish between the undergraduate and the graduate, so on the form, it asks for the total number of hours required for the degree plan. So maybe that particular degree plan will be 150. You would indicate the 150, but over to the side, what a lot of schools will do is indicate how many hours were required for the graduate degree and how many were required for the undergraduate. So for a lot of schools, it's 36 hours for the graduate degree. We know that on those programs, they'll start taking those graduate courses even while they're still taking their undergraduate courses. So there's not really a way to distinguish. What we are able to do, though, is as long as we have the total number of hours that were required and what was required for the graduate school, we can back out that 36 hours to see if they meet the criteria. So they would still then have to be within that 6 credit hour limit once we back out the graduate school hours. Does that make sense? Okay. So those students won't really meet the year criteria because the only 5 years are engineering and architecture with the specific zip codes. So they'll have to meet it on the number of hours. Anything else? Thank you, guys. If any other questions come up, we'll be right over there.
I'm getting a workout today. So I'm going to stand up here and do my best to answer or address some of the legislative changes that came out of the last session. And maybe I should preface this by saying I've never been invited to go to the Capitol. I've really never gone, and I really don't want to go. So I'll try my best. Changes for the 14-15 academic year. BOT will only be available to eligible students at four-year institutions. Now, if there's any students who are at two-year institutions, then we're committed to helping them get through that two-year program and hopefully into the 4 years. So we will handle those that are in the two-year programs moving forward. Allocations. I think the statute now says the coordinating board will formally develop an allocation methodology. And in the past, what we've done is we've tried to do allocations in the best way we could, taking into account several factors. Always interested in keeping the renewal students going with what's left of the funds made available to us from the legislature, the appropriations part of it, which is where the independent institutions get their funding. We try to divvy up what's left equitably, fairly. And then thirdly, we're real interested in just getting the money out there and getting it used. Now, with this, we'll probably have to sit back and reevaluate, making it more defined and hopefully address all those three items, but in a more defined, methodical way. So that, as it says, is to be determined. Yes, ma'am. I don't profess to be up on that aspect of it, Carol, negotiated rulemaking.
Can you repeat?
The question was whether or not allocations in particular.
Allocations, yeah, would be subject to negotiated rulemaking under Senate Bill 215, and I'm being told over here, yes, they will be.
There you go. Thank you.
Will that be true of Cal as well?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Senate Bill 215 talked about negotiated rulemaking for all allocations of general revenue funds. So we'll definitely put Beyond Time into that mix. I don't know that it was our intention to do that with Cal.
Any other questions?
Albert, we have a Cal question. I'm sorry, Beyond Time question.
Okay.
How does the Beyond Time loan work with a 5-year program? Is a student eligible for Beyond Time and the forgiveness for a 5-year program?
I think, as Michelle mentioned, there are specific degree plans that are recognized by the coordinating board as being 5-year plans. I think the promissory note that students execute refers to even I think they're called SIP numbers.
Right. There are two categories that have the 5-year plan, which is architecture and engineering. So those we know are on a 5-year degree plan. For the others, if it's the dual degree where you get the bachelor's and the master's together, those are not included unless it's architecture or engineering. So the student still could be eligible for forgiveness based on the total number of hours that they've earned.
Changes for the 14-15 year. Each institution will now be able to determine the award amount for Beyond Time. And you know, in the past, we've always made suggestions or recommendations when funding was lean. We might have gone out and suggested lower award amounts so that the amounts could be spread amongst more of the students in school. Well, now you really don't even need our guidance. You can set your own award amounts year to year. During the last legislative session, there was some focus put on Beyond Time. I believe the legislature was looking to be sure that, number one, it was a viable program, that it was doing what it was supposed to do, what it was intended to do, and kind of a look at the risk of the program from a financial standpoint. And coming out of that were two new requirements. There will be required loan repayment and forgiveness or default prevention counseling if any institution, public or independent, if their default rate falls below the statewide average of defaults. Also, if the forgiveness rate for an institution falls below 50% of the statewide forgiveness rate, these counseling sessions would be required. We're working with TG to kind of develop a module so that all students and all institutions will have available to kind of help in that. And I think you asked about being proactive. Well, because statute says we need to define and develop these default rates and forgiveness rates, that's another aspect that we'll be looking at here in the future before the 14-15 academic year, to be sure that we're using the correct data sets, that we're using the right information, that we're using the correct cross-section of students in calculating the methodology for default and for forgiveness. And once we nail that down, then again, one option is to publish that, make it available. Right now, it has been kind of an on-request basis, and we gladly will do that. But our goal is to define those a little more firmly and be consistent with them year to year. Any questions?
So to receive those rates, we can email you?
Yes, sir. You can.
Okay.
You can.
Okay.
And it'll be using current methodology, so it may change, but for now, yeah, we can do that for you. We've thrown out there the last couple of years the potential for a sweep of any unused BOT funds. Well, like with all state programs effective in February of 2015, within that 14-15 year, there will be a sweep. Any unused funds will be swept. And along with that, of course, we'll have to develop a means for any interested schools who might be looking for some additional funds to put their name in the hat, and also a method of distributing those additional funds fairly and equitably. And unfortunately, last but not least, we've done our best over the last several years to fund beyond time first disbursements in August to obviously get the money to the students when they really need it before school starts. We've always, in the past years, kind of had funds available to us, we'll just put it that way, funds available to kind of honor those August disbursement dates. Well, those funds will no longer be available to us. We'll be like the other programs, BOT will be like the other programs where in the state budgeting process and appropriations process, those funds will not be made available to us until September 1st. So beginning with the 14-15 next September, there won't unfortunately be any early BOT disbursements, any August disbursements. And our goal today was to kind of run through this, not necessarily quickly, and still answer any questions that you might have, but we're done, unless anybody has any questions. Yes, sir.
You know, I'll have a question about Be on Time, Albert.
No problem.
Appreciate all your help on this program, because we love this program and it's helped our students tremendously. I have a question about obviously we use our money for renewals first, and let's say we have some money left over after that for the fall, and we use some of that for new students. We're allowed to do that. Then let's say we use all of our money. Do we need to hold any money for spring renewals, or can you count it all good in the fall, and then if you need new renewal money, request it from you at that point and get additional renewal money?
I wouldn't necessarily count on additional funds. The last couple of years, BOT has been utilized pretty much to the max. You will need to try to predict spring awards. If there's a sweep, or when the sweep occurs, if there's additional funds, there may be some, but I don't know that I would necessarily count on that.
What we don't want to happen is not use all our allocation because we're thinking we need $100,000 for the spring and then you don't need it. So if we were to use all our money in the fall and then have additional renewals in the spring, would we be penalized for having used all our money in the fall for including the new students?
I believe it's a move away from that kind of concept of new and renewals and how you handle that. We would assume that the goal is to take care of your renewals first, ensure that they're taken care of, and then leave it to you as to how you want to handle any residual allocation.
Okay. Then will guaranteed renewals, kind of that's what we've called them, I don't know, that's existed in the past, will that kind of go away with this new
I believe
plan?
so.
Yeah, seems like
the money, the allocation will be the allocation unless through the sweeping process there's more made available to you.
Okay.
In case anybody had some questions that are left over or come to mind on your trip back home, there's our contact information. I think most of you know how to get a hold of me or Davin, and if not, Janie. By all means, we're more than glad to field any questions that come up. Michelle, and I apologize to Michelle, her name isn't up here, but we'll publish that so that she can have some fun along with us.
You can reach me at Janie's phone number.
Thank you all for everything.
Okay, folks, we're getting ready to move to the next phase of the workshop. That is what we typically refer to as the drive-through. Where we'll try to bring you up to date on some other aspects of the operations up here. Our first speaker is Renee Jones to talk about the college work-study program.
Dawn? There we go, sorry. Again, my name is Renee Jones, and today I will be talking to you about the Texas College Work Study Program. In order for a student to qualify for Texas College Work Study, they must be a Texas resident, enrolled at least half-time of a full course load, show financial need, and is registered with Selective Service or either be exempt. I have schools ask me a lot, what is the maximum amount a student can receive from the work study program? So I have a question for you. If you have a student whose EFC is greater than $4,000, is he or she still eligible to receive Texas College Work Study? I know you all say yes, but the answer is there. But it is yes. As long as the student is determined to still have financial need, they're eligible. Just keep in mind that a student's award amount cannot exceed their financial need. If you have another question, if you have a male student who's 17 years old and has not registered for Selective Service, are they still eligible for Texas College Work Study? Again, you're right, it's yes, as long as they registered after their 18th birthday, but before they're awarded the following year. If you have a Texas College Work Study student, well, not a Texas College Work Study student, if you have a student who is an athletic scholarship recipient, if they're enrolled in a seminary or any other program leading to license to preach for a religious sect, or an undocumented or international student, they're unable to qualify for Texas College Work Study. So if you have a student that qualifies for aid using TASFA and they don't have a Social Security number, they are not eligible for Texas College Work Study because a Social Security number is necessary in order to work in the United States. If your institution has been granted a Title III or Title V waiver, which exempts you from the 25% matching requirement, then the state will also honor that waiver letter. All you have to do is submit a copy to me. And also, we have some schools that request to match more than the 25% so that they can award more students, and that is acceptable. The minimum amount is 25%, but you can match more if your institution chooses to. Oops. If your institution participates in TEG, I know I have the other programs listed because we went over this with the private schools and the public schools, And I understand that you guys only participate in TEG and Texas College Work Study. And starting this year, you can transfer 10% or $20,000 between those two programs. All you have to do is just send an email to the program specialist, either myself or Raphael, requesting that transfer. Again, starting this year, you can transfer 10% or $20,000, and keep in mind that that amount applies to the account from which the money is coming from. And the last thing I would like to go over with you is the progress report and the year-end report. The progress report is due February 20th, and if that date falls on a weekend, then it's due that following Monday. And what we use the progress report for, it gives us a snapshot of how you're using your funds, how many students you've awarded, any additional funds that you can use, any money that you're going to return, or how much you've used. And the last report is the year-end report, and it's due on June 17th. And I just want to mention that if you submit your report in June and then in July or August you need to make a correction, it's real important that you send me a revised report, because we use that to reconcile with the financial aid database. And if my number and your numbers don't match, then you can't certify with Texas College. With your Texas College Work Study and FAST report won't certify. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Next section, we're going to be doing an overview of the revised Grants and Special Programs information website. Actually, it's going to be Sophia Rodriguez over there in the corner in front of the computer who'll be giving this presentation. Raise your hand, Sophia. Wave to the crowd. Hey, like you just don't care. Yeah. All right. And I'm going to be standing up here in case you have any questions. She's also going to be going through, as I mentioned earlier during one of my presentations, the requesting funds online. She's going to show you how to do that as well. Sophia, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm going to be going back and forth. The information website address is the www.thecb.state.tx.us/apps and special programs. If you don't already have this as your favorites, I suggest that you make it a favorite. Oh, 1 second. So I'm going to log out of here, and I'm actually going to go to the website and show you guys the website. 1 second. I apologize for the delay. If you're not already familiar, this is our revised Grants and Special Programs information website. And on this website, you can see we will post news you can use. It's the first thing listed, and those are usually updated on a monthly basis with information that we have posted on the website. Below that, there's general information. There you may be able to find memos that might have been sent out recently or in the past. We archive them as well. Calendar, program deadlines, financial aid database, the manuals listed, college student budgets, you can log in there. If you've been watching the Financial Aid Advisory Committee meetings, the agendas and handouts will be there. Meeting notes are updated afterwards, and a link to the recording will be listed there in case you missed the live meeting. I'm going to come back around to the program-specific information and show you general references and forms. A coordinating board rules is there, residency information, and also the new Q&A. If you are not familiar with the Q&A, it's a great addition to our website. These Q&As are emailed out by Lynn Kenyon. And if you happen to miss the email, you can always reference our cross-reference, and I'm going to show that to you now. It'll list all the questions that the Q&A has answered in the past, and it'll also show you the publication date where the answer is available. So, for example, if you had a question about Be On Time, are undocumented students eligible to apply for Be On Time? That question was answered on February 14, 2012, and you can refer down to the February 14, 2012 publication for the answer. Every time a new Q&A is published, a cross-reference is updated so that information is up to date. Near the bottom of the website, there's trainings, webinars, and workshops. For example, today's workshop is available. The broadcast link, the presentations and handouts can be printed from the website. And then we also have webinars. If you have new aid officers, they could watch our webinar trainings. We have a specific TEG webinar training available. It's a 4-part series. What's nice about these webinar trainings, they're really only 10 minutes long on average. So even though there's 4 parts to it, you can watch it in 40 minutes in less than an hour. They have quizzes and handout information so that you can review what you've watched. But it isn't so long. Not every part takes an hour. It only takes 10 minutes. So I'm going to go back up to the program-specific information and toggle back to the PowerPoint to show you our new fund request form. Under the program-specific information, you're going to be able to find your allocation and guidelines, also the audit guide and any memos. The fund request instructions are available here, and this is where you would log in to request funds. After logging in, you're going to see, you're going to see the fund request form, and this is what it looks like. The fund request forms, contact information needs to be filled out every single time that a request is submitted. The information that's provided for the reporting financial aid officer, the email that's entered into that email will be used to receive a copy of the completed fund request form for your records. So you don't necessarily need to print out a screenshot of the email that you or the website. You're actually going to get a PDF copy emailed to the reporting officer listed in the fund request form for your records. I wanted to point out a few changes. In the past, we've always asked for cumulative total number of students. Now when you request money, you're going to be asked to enter the amount of funds that you're requesting for now, and also the number of new students that will be awarded with those funds. So these numbers may look a little strange in the spring. If you requested $1 million for 100 students in the fall, and then you're just requesting the second half of that $1 million in the spring, then it would just be $1 million with 0 new students. At the bottom, we're going to collect the cumulative total of information. So you enter your allocation, and we use this information to kind of audit what we've received throughout the year. You'll enter your allocation, the year-to-date amount of funds that you've requested, including the funds that you're requesting currently, and then the year-to-date total number of students. If there's any discrepancy, we are going to call and reject the form and ask you to submit a revised form. If that happens, or if you notice that you've made an error, you can simply click that you are submitting a revised form here, enter the date of the original submission, and then explanation. And it could be simple. I added 1 additional 0. I'm sorry, I need to correct that. And so you just make that explanation so we have it for our records, and we'll use the new revised form to process your payment. Do you have anything to add, Raphael?
No.
Okay. We are working with our IT department. I know that in the past and in these workshops, you guys have asked for a award history verification screen that is available for Texas Grant and TEOG and yet to be available for TEG. We are working and hopefully trying to get that to you as soon as possible. And it would have information about award history. What we want to emphasize, if that does come available, it is not a verification screen. It'll just give you some information about what we know from the student, hours completed, years in the program. It doesn't determine eligibility. So it's an aid to you that we're hoping to provide, but it's not there to determine eligibility. And I know that Raphael wanted to make sure to mention that we are still working on that. We know that we hear you asking for it, and we are working on it.
Yes.
If you guys have any further questions, Raphael is available to answer them. If you have any suggestions for information that you'd like to see on the websites, we are open to suggestions. If there's more information that you'd like available, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to incorporate that. No questions? Thank you for your time.
Sorry, we do have one more piece to the drive-through that we wanted to mention to you, and that was brought up earlier about the negotiated rulemaking process. In your handout, there is a one-pager, actually, it's a single sheet, two-pager because it's front and back, that is just some of the information from the government code dealing with negotiated rulemaking. And what I would suggest you do, rather than just read that little summary that I tried to type up from the government code, is actually go to the government code and read what it is. It's only a few pages long. But it will be interesting for us to move into this mode of rule changing. As was mentioned before, Senate Bill 215, which was our sunset bill, has specific provisions in it that we will use negotiated rulemaking for our allocation process. Another part of that was to indicate that the allocation process is to be described in rule, while in the past that has not been a part of our rules for the programs. As I understand it, and that is a big conditional lead-in prepositional phrase. So as I understand it, the negotiated rulemaking process is mainly designed to make sure that everyone who has a vested interest in the results has a chance to be a part of the negotiation of the rules for that issue. And there are two primary individuals that get involved in this thing. One is called a convener, which is someone that is hired or appointed by the board to function as the convener. This person helps the board determine the appropriateness of using negotiated rulemaking and helps them identify the players that should be brought to the table for the discussions. And once the convener is finished with his or her job, then a group of people for a negotiated rulemaking committee has been identified. And the coordinating board then posts the information about this in the Texas Register and elsewhere so people will know it's coming up. Apparently, there's still an opportunity for someone to express an interest to participate in those negotiations if they're interested in it and haven't been already brought to the table. But once all of that is done, then a person called a facilitator conducts the meetings of this committee to try to help that committee come to a consensus on how the rule should be written and how the procedure should be done. Then there's a final report that committee makes to the board as to either it would hopefully be in the form of a proposed rule to go forward. If there is a as I would put it, hung jury as to how this needs to go. There'll be a list of the things that they haven't been able to agree upon. But anyway, the good news about it is that it does get people to the table that have a vested interest in the outcome of this thing. And so we will have an opportunity to take a look at our allocation processes, which have been internally developed at the coordinating board, and get input as to whether we should continue doing it the same way or change the way we do it. Now, the TEG allocation process was actually worked out through what's very similar to a negotiated rulemaking process back in the 80s? 1985, that's kind of how I remember it. I was very young then, so I don't remember it very well. But the colleges did work into, prior to, at the beginning, TEG was allocated strictly on enrollments. No need angle at all. And so that negotiated rulemaking was what brought us into the current world of basing it on each individual school's TEG need. And whether that is the way we should continue to do it or not will be probably determined through this negotiated rulemaking process. I believe TEG will probably be the first of our programs whose allocation process will go through this the negotiated rulemaking process. So you're going to kind of be, your program will be kind of our guinea pig as we learn how to do this. And so we're all on the learning curve to see where this all ends up. But we'll be back in touch with you. You'll hear more about it as we get closer. I think originally the goal was to get the rules redone in time for spring allocations for next year. We have no sense of how long this is going to take, so we'll stay tuned to see whether we're able to accomplish that. Again, the first programs or so that we go through negotiated rulemaking, it's probably feasible to have it done in time for spring allocations. Those that are the last programs that we get to may or may not get into effect until the following year. But this should be an interesting process, okay? If you have any questions, I can't answer them, but I'll be glad to hear what those questions are. And I would recommend, if you're interested in it, that you take a look at the government code as indicated at the top of that handout, and you can get a better sense of how this whole thing works. And we'll be back in touch. The only other thing had to do with best practices, and I think we've heard some of those as we've gone along today. Anytime you have something, an aha moment as to how to handle one of the difficult aspects of TEG, we would love to hear from you and share that piece of wisdom with the rest of the community. Because we're all in this thing together, and if we can share that kind of discovery, it would be helpful for all of us. We've heard several things today that we hadn't thought about that we will definitely look into, and that's been our learning curve from this workshop, and we greatly appreciate it. We have one more session to go, and that has to do with the financial aid database. Yes, ma'am, excuse me. The question was, does everyone know how to access the government code? If you go to Texas Legislature online, I guess it's www.texaslegislatureonline. Okay, Google it by that name. Thank you very much. So it's Texas Legislature Online. Once you get to their main page, you'll see a section where you can ask for statutes. Right, statutes, and then within statutes it breaks it down by type, and that was, for instance, education code, family, that kind of thing, but there will be a government code. And you'll click on that, and then using the information on the sheet that you have, you'll be able to enter something using find, and it will take you to that section of the statute. Okay? And if you have trouble making that work, contact Carol McDonald. She does that in her sleep. She works with those codes in her sleep. Okay, give us just a second to set things up for Tanya, and we'll move on to the financial aid database. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya Trevino. Do we have anyone new to the financial aid database report in the audience? One newbie, two newbies. Great. As most of you know, the process has already begun. We've begun in July, actually, this year, so we did start a little bit early. Do not worry. I will probably be out in October, but we do have staff that will help still facilitate the financial aid database and help answer any questions. So I may be out, but never fear. First, I wanted to go over the reporting details and the processes. The students that are actually to be included in your financial aid database report. You're to include all students who were enrolled at your institution and completed either a FAFSA or TASFA, even if they did not receive aid. And the enrolled part is the important part. You may have students who completed a FAFSA or a TASFA and put your school code down, but did not actually enroll at your institution. Those students you would not include on your financial aid database report. You'll also include any student who was enrolled at your institution and may have received merit aid, non-need-based aid, or exemptions and waivers, but they may not have completed a FAFSA or a TASFA, and you would include those students. You will be using the SFTP server to submit your file, and the financial aid database report is a fixed length file, which means all of your records, all of your fields are on one line. You use zeros as fillers and spaces as fillers when necessary. I know some of the other year-end reports, like Texas Grant, you have to use a tab delimited. So this is actually a different format. This is a flow chart for giving you an idea of how the process works. The institution first submits the file. You'll submit an entire financial aid database file. This is all of your students. Then the file receipt confirmation is sent to the institution's generic email address. There are a couple of institutions that we have not received a test email back from. So if you do not recall receiving an actual email from us, let me know and we'll check on it. It could be one of two things: either it came back undeliverable, or your IT staff still needs to set you up as part of the distribution list of that email address. After the file is received and you receive a file receipt confirmation, then our system performs the edit checks on the report. The edit report notification is then sent to your institution, and again, it's sent to the generic email address. Your institution will review the edit report. You retrieve the edit report through the SFTP server. If you had any errors or any students that were showing as not matching between your financial aid database file and your CBM 001, then you will need to correct the errors and resubmit your entire file again. If you had no errors and all of your students matched, then you will automatically be sent a program and demographic summary report, which is an Excel format. That will go to your generic email address as well. With that report, you will need to make sure all of your programs reconcile. Make sure the proper students are being reflected, the proper number of awards are being reflected for each program. There are a couple of programs that we actually will give you totals from your year-end reports for. TEG, Texas Grant, TEOG, and Top 10. So those will actually give you what you reported on your year-end reports to match. If any of those totals do not match, then you would need to correct your financial aid database file and resubmit the entire file again. If all of your programs match and your demographic information is correct, then you will need to request a certification. And that's actually just sending an email to us, letting us know that you reviewed all the data, it's correct, and you're requesting your certification. We will then send you a certification memo to complete and send back to us. But the request for certification cannot be done until all of your programs reconcile. The deadline this year is December 2nd, and that is when the report must be submitted, error-free, reconciled to CB year-end reports and the CBM 001, the year-end reports and the CBM 001, and certified. We have listed the processing schedule here for you. Just be aware that there are going to be times when, especially close to the deadline, every institution is trying to get their file in, so there will be a delay. We are going to work with the staff, Jane's staff, to try to let you know if we see a lag or if we see a delay or if something happened with their server, to let you know at least why you have not received your file receipt confirmation or for a reason if you haven't received your edit report notification. If you do not receive your file receipt confirmation, please notify us. Do not assume that we have received your report. And the same goes for the edit report notification. If you don't receive it by the process time and we haven't notified you that there is a delay, then please let us know and we'll check on it. A couple of things to remember. When submitting your file through the SFTP server, you must disconnect promptly from the session after successfully transferring your file. And the file, once you move it over to the white space underneath your folders, you will actually see a completed message, and that means your file has been transferred and you can go ahead and log out of it. Also make sure there's only one person at your institution that's logged into the session at one time. Do not log into the server at the 03 minute or the 33 minute of the hour, 33 time of the hour. Our system does an automatic synchronization, so it automatically wipes off any files that are out there. If your institution submits a variety of reports at the same time, such as the FAD, the FAD report and the CBM 001 or 09, several of the CBM reports, the FAD report is processed first. However, you won't actually receive your file receipt confirmation until all of the reports are in. Like I said earlier, there will be a slight delay during our peak times, and those peak times will be when several reports are being submitted at the same time, the CBM 001 and the FAD, or when we are close to the FAD deadline and everyone's trying to get their file in. We didn't have a lot of changes this year. The things that are staying, just to bring your attention to as a reminder, is you can still report alpha and numeric characters for the Social Security number and the ID fields. The ethnicity fields, we have the race field, which is field 15, and the ethnicity codes, fields 16A through G, is still the same. We still have the matching of your FADs to your CBM 001 report. We still have the use of the unmatched field codes, and I'll go into the codes on the next slide. The tuition exemptions and waivers fields, it's still continued for this year. Fields 6 through 11 are for public institutions only, and private institutions will continue to use field 29, which is just an aggregate total of your exemptions and waivers. One discontinued field for this year was the Bird Scholarship, field 31J, and that one is to be reported with filler field, as a filler field with zeros. When your FAD students and your CBM 001 students do not match, you will receive a list of those students. The list does appear on your edit report notification, and it appears right before your errors or your warnings are listed and right after your your aggregate program information is listed. All of the codes are listed here. When you first submit your file, you'll submit every student with a 00 in that field, unless you already know why the student might not show up as matching. Then you can put the code in ahead of time. Once you get that list of students, if you get the list of students that do not match, then you'll use the appropriate code from the list.
When you use the code, the student will no longer appear on the list the next time your FAD report is run. If you use code 06, which is student's social security number ID was reported incorrectly and a change will or has been made through the CBM 001, you do not have to wait for your registrar's office to submit that paperwork and get it approved before resubmitting your FAD file. So you can do both at the same time. When you use code 11, you do need to send an email to us to let us know the reason for using that code. Overrides. There will be cases when you have errors that are not actually errors to your institution. You may have program maximums for students that they actually did receive that amount. If in those cases, you'll need to send us an email letting us know the last 4 digits of the student's social, the data element for which you're requesting the override, and then the reason for the override. Once we receive that, we will let you know the override was granted, and you can process your, we'll either continue, if you have no other errors, continue with your reconciliation. Some common overrides that I have seen are Texas Grant Professional Judgment. If a student's reported on the Texas Grant file is lower than full-time, then that will come up as an error on the FAD report, and then an email just needs to be sent to us letting us know that was the case, and we verify against your year-end report that it was reported as such on that report as well. Some programs may have a higher maximum for health-related institutions, such as the loan fields. That could be also an override. And then again, using code 11 for unmatched reason. That will need also to be in some cases, it may come up as an override, just depends on the reason. Some common errors that we have seen and may help to help you identify ahead of time. The enrollment adjustment percentage fields, which are fields 35A and 35B, those need to be set to 3 zeros unless the student's cost of attendance and or EFC should be reduced by a certain percentage. If you receive an error that an award amount for a student that a student is receiving exceeds their need, then check fields 35A and 35B. We have found that some systems automatically populate those fields with a number, and then that will throw off the student as an error. Students that did not complete a needs analysis, if they did not complete a needs analysis, meaning they only received merit aid or non-need-based aid, then they'll need to be coded with a 2 under field 13, and their EFC needs to be set to 6 nines. Programs not matching during your reconciliation process. If you have any programs that are showing as not matching, either your financial aid database report needs to be corrected or your year-end report needs to be corrected. And to correct your year-end report, you would need to contact the Jane staff. Reporting ethnicity and race fields. We do have the ethnicity field, which is field 15, to report if the student is Hispanic or not. But also, you must report the race for that student. If the student is reporting themselves just as Hispanic only, then you would need to indicate that on field 15. And then for field 16A through G, the only field that will have a number is field 16F, which you'll report a 7 in. All of the other ones will be set to 0. But you must have something in both fields. Students that were not enrolled at your institution, again, those students would not be included on your financial aid database report, even though they may have submitted a FAFSA or TASFA. Students showing as not matching between the FADS and the CBM report, as we talked about earlier, those students would need to be coded with a code in order to be removed from that list. And you would not be able to continue to the reconciliation process until all those students have been removed. The last one, which is and it shows up as it's listed, error, total 8 applicants does not equal to the records reported. This means the number of 8 applicants in your header record, it needs to equal to the number of records that you're actually submitting. So you would need to correct your header record and then resubmit your entire file. The certification process. Once you're error-free, and every time you submit your file and resubmit your file and become error-free, you'll receive the reconciliation memo, which is the program and demographic summary reports, as an Excel file. After all of your programs reconcile, again, you must request the certification to us. Send us an email, and there's actually in the manual the actual wording for the request for certification. Once we receive that, then we will actually send you the certification memo to complete and email back to us. You will not be able to submit the certification unless you have received the reconciliation memo first from us and all of your programs have reconciled. You can check the status of your certification. Once we receive it, it's really hard for us to send you back an email saying, yes, we received it, because we received so many at one time. But you can check the status on our website that's listed here. And it'll also tell you if your institution's still showing errors or no errors, or where you're at. The last slide, it just gives our email address. You can contact us. We now have a generic email address that is checked by more than one person, by more than me. So this is monitored daily, and all your questions will be forwarded. If you have questions regarding program specific, they'll be forwarded to the appropriate person and so forth. Please be aware that email is always the fastest way to contact us, especially since there's more than one person checking it. Any questions?
I'd like to mention some issues that have been going on, or discussions that have been going on about the matching between the 001 and the FADS report. The Financial Aid Advisory Committee has a subcommittee on the financial aid database, and they have been meeting, or have had several meetings to discuss, and they were discussing the FADS in general, but the thing that came high on their list of things to be addressed and changed if possible is this matching requirement between the 001 and the FADS report. Bottom line is that the two reports do not address the same populations. You have a lot of people that you make financial aid awards to who are not included in the 001, and so that's why you end up having to explain why they're not in the 001. There are two ways of addressing that problem. One would be to expand the 001 or add a different reporting enrollment report so that everybody who is enrolled is indeed on an enrollment report that can be checked and compared to the FADS report, or to somehow figure out how to limit the errors that come out in the FADS report to just those issues that we think we need to address. The one that raised this issue originally that caused us to start doing the match was the undocumented students, or the affidavit students who were receiving state aid. There was a desire to know how many hours were they taking, how many, all this kind of stuff. And because of the Social Security number versus student ID issues, we couldn't find people in the 001. And then we just had kind of a panic or concern about whether these kids were actually enrolled and all this kind of thing. So all I can really say at this time is that we're aware that this is a really difficult thing for you guys to do. Our closest step to try to help you with it was by adding that information to the end-of-year report so that you at least get a preview of the students who are likely to crop up in your FADS report for explanation. Now, in the end-of-year report, they're just warnings, so you can ignore them and just wait and address the issue in the fall. But as Tanya indicated, if you have figured out why those students are not in the 001, the first time you submit your FADS report, you can go ahead and code them and decrease the number of errors for that purpose that show up in your FADS reports, and maybe make that an easier process for you to proceed on. But the good news is that this is being looked at a high level at the coordinating board. We recognize the need to do something about it. And it can't get changed for this round of reports, but maybe, possibly, hopefully, for next year's report, we'll be in a situation where you won't have that much of a burden to make those two reports mesh. There were 33,000 students who had to be explained because they were not in the 001 because they were but were in the FADS report. Again, we recognize that's a whole lot of work for you to do to figure out why, and so hopefully we'll get an answer, a solution, or an improvement to the situation before you're working on the FY14 FADS report. And that's kind of as much as I can say, but at least we're working in that direction.
Thank you.
Are there anything, we're coming rapidly to the close of the workshop. Are there any questions that are still pending that we may or perhaps need to address? Yes, sir.
I have a off-agenda request.
Okay.
I've got a request from my administration to ask you about the study on financial aid for online or distance education. Apparently there's supposed to be a study about creating a new student aid assistance program for those students, and just wanted to have any idea if you've gotten it started or have a...
It has not yet been started. You are correct. There was an assignment for that to be pursued, and I'm sure that steps will be taken soon to put together a group to discuss it. If you're particularly interested in it, we'd be glad for you to, why don't you send me your email address, and if we have if the approach is to bring a group of representatives from different organizations in, then we might have an opportunity to have you involved in those discussions. The result is to be a draft legislation for a program, a state financial aid program for students who are only enrolled in online courses. And so we have some learning to do to figure out how to do that. So again, I'd appreciate if you let me, send me your email, and as that progresses, we'll be in touch. Thank you. Any other questions that we can help you with at this time? Last thing that I would mention is that this broadcast has been, I don't know the right term, but taped. That's probably a very wrong term. Recorded, thank you. It has been recorded. And the one yesterday was also recorded, the one for the public institutions, and I was told that that one would hopefully be posted on our website sometime early next week. So I would hope that this one would be posted by the end of next week. If you have staff members who are unable to sit in on this or watch it, or for those schools out in cyberspace who didn't get a chance to see it today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This has been a good workshop in that you have asked us questions, we've learned from you, and hopefully we've given you some useful information. Anyone on staff with a last note to say? Please have a safe trip home, and we look forward to continued work with you. Thanks you again for coming. And thank you for tuning in. You're welcome for the cookies.